hello. Make sure that we are functioning properly. Getting everything set up on my end. Sorry about that. I know that I waited a little while. What I like to do is I like to get the opening thing started about 10 minutes early. Well, 15 minutes rather, if I can, so that way it gives y'all time to get here, like y'all know that it's happening. It gives me time to send out messages to folks to let them know, and also gives me time to set everything up so that I can do my reading. Welcome, one and all. If you are new to my channel or new to this stream series, I'm Raven. And today we're not doing any gaming. We're not playing any games or any of that kind of stuff. This screen you're looking at right here is what you're going to see for the duration. So if you want to listen to this in the background, feel free. That is totally fine. What we're doing here is we're chilling out because Mondays are stressful days for a lot of people. You know, weekend is over and people are getting back to the routine. And because of that, I figure I would use Monday nights to chill out, read some of my stories to you guys, just have a good time. And so what we've been doing is we've been reading New Epic, which is one of my stories. We've been reading some short stories. We started reading Monster Club as well as Everyday Life with Raptors. Got a lot we can read. Like, we barely scratched the surface of the stories that I have written, and I would love to read more with you guys. I hope that we can have a good time tonight. Make sure my mic is low. My mic is low. Hold on. Adjust that. Should be able to fix it. There, think I fixed it. How's that? That any better? Can y'all hear me better now? Is this more acceptable? Let me know in chat because I don't want y'all to have trouble hearing me in chat. All right. Well, hopefully we'll have some other folks pop in. I sent out messages to my friend Daniel and to Havoc and to a few others. Hopefully they'll be able to pop in. I know Hannah's here. I saw her. I hope that Aaron can pop in. I know he's been real busy today. So let's go ahead and get ready to begin. So for starters, I always try to start off by reading a short story or poem. So I think we'll start with that again. Let's do Red Cross. Let's read Red Cross first. Red Cross is a short story that I wrote. It was a Halloween short story. I don't know if Havoc will join or not, Tech. I don't know if he'll be here or not, but that'd be cool. Aaron just showed up. That's cool. That's good. If Havoc does show up, awesome. Be very welcoming as usual. All right, so we're going to read Red Cross first. Red Cross is a short story I wrote back in October of 2019. This is a very old story. This is about 4 or 5 years old now. And, sorry, I needed some water. It is Halloween based. That means it's a little, it has a monster theme, as you know I enjoy. So let's not waste any time. Let's start reading. This is Red Cross, a Halloween short story written October 23rd, 2019. Now take a deep breath, officer. You'll feel a little pinch and then it's over, the nurse said. I'd heard it before. I knew what to expect. I lay back in the recliner as the nurse stuck a needle into my arm with the rolled up sleeve. I didn't mind the pinch in my arm because I wasn't even looking at it. I'd come to this Red Cross donation center many times and never felt bothered by the process. Thank you again for this. We need more generous souls like you. Happy to help, I answered, grinning. The truth is that when I first came here, it was for generous reasons. As a police officer, people often look to me as a symbol of generosity and justice, and I was in most respects. But after my first visit here, the generous aspect of this had faded. I had a different reason to come, and I was waiting to see it walk in. I lay back, my eyes scanning the large room to analyze and look over the scene. There were about 6 more folks in the donation center beside me. 3 were in their 50s and looked like your common decent old folks wanting to do their part for others. 1 was a college kid who looked really uncomfortable, like he was about to be sick as he watched them clean his arm. The last one was a teenage girl who was texting on her phone with one hand while her other had a needle stuck in it. I glanced over all of them. They weren't the ones I'd come to see. I started to put away my hopes and lay back. I'd wait till next time. She must not be here today. But just as I started to close my eyes, I saw her. She walked out of the back room of the facility, smiling. Her white lab coat fell down just past her knees, and she was in heeled shoes that clicked on the hard tile floor when she walked. She was an albino lady with ashen hair and pinkish eyes, which I guess unnerved some folks because when she walked by, a few folks looked at her with awkward glances. Me? I found her alluring. She looked close to my age, but I hadn't seen her around town or anywhere else. This was the only place I ever saw her. She'd been the nurse who worked on me the first time I'd come in and been too shy to say anything to her. The only thing I knew about her was that her name was Lily. But now I was desperate to talk to her. I had to get her number, to contact her. Every time I came in when she was working, I'd try to talk to her. She'd smile at me, flashing her gorgeous white teeth with a twinkle in her eye that seemed to warm up the room. I once got close and asked her if she'd be willing to eat out, but she shook her head and declined in the cutest way possible. You're so sweet, but I'm not very good with the whole dating thing. I just want to get through my master's and focus on my education. I'm really sorry. I wanted to push the discussion and ask what her master's was, but she was called away when I could ask. I cursed myself for not having the nerve to try harder, but today would be different. I'd practice what I'd do and what I'd say over and over again to try and prepare myself for this evening. After the nurse came by and undid my needle and helped me up, she hurried the next person over to sit in the recliner. I was escorted to the waiting area, and as I walked by, Lily spotted me and gave a friendly wave. I waved back and made a move to approach her, but suddenly her shoulder was tapped by a doctor who she turned to and began speaking with. I glowered a bit and walked back to the waiting room to sit and wait. It was getting dark out, and the donation center would close in an hour. I'd wait the full hour if I had to. I wouldn't mess this up again. I couldn't. So wait I would. I was determined to speak to Lily. Even if she turned down my date offer, I'd at least try to get her number. She had no ring on her finger, and she never seemed to fall back on the age-old shutdown of "I have a boyfriend," which has sent many hopeful bachelors weeping like children back to their apartments. I knew she was available. And if she wasn't, no, it was better not to think that way. That's pessimistic thinking, and it won't help. I finally had no choice but to leave the building and wait in the parking lot. I'd wait till she was off her shift. It was now really dark out, and the lamps over the parking lot were the only light that could be seen other than the slow and methodical car lights that moved along the highway not far off. I leaned against my car, tapping my foot and waiting patiently, lightly scratching the Band-Aid on my arm over where I'd been stuck with the needle. The other nurses and doctors had all left by now, chatting and talking away, but Lily was still inside. She must have been working late or something. I'd wait, though. Even if it made me look like a stalker, I had to wait on her. I felt like it was something I just needed to do. After what felt like hours, I finally saw the lights go off in the donation center, and I saw the familiar ashen hair of Lily exit the building. She locked the door behind her and had a purse over her shoulder as well as a lunchbox. I guess she worked pretty long hours to have to bring a lunchbox. She reached into the lunchbox and pulled out what appeared to be a Capri Sun packet and sipped it as she walked towards her car. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt myself sweat a little as I started to walk. She screamed and swung her purse at my head. The next thing I knew, my vision went dark, and I saw nothing. My head was pounding as I stirred. I reached up and rubbed the aching spot on my forehead, where the throbbing was the worst. I opened my eyes and saw that I was no longer in the parking lot outside of the blood donation center, but I appeared to be laying on a couch. It wasn't my apartment couch either. The couch was incredibly soft and blue in color, and as I groaned and tried to sit up, I felt the cushion sink a bit under my weight. The room was white with posters and paintings on the wall. A fridge and kitchen could be seen across the room where the carpet ended and the wooden floor began. It was a very nice and feminine-looking apartment, but it sure wasn't my apartment. I started to sit up when I felt a force holding my hands behind me. I looked behind me to see that a belt had tied my wrists together. I squirmed and struggled to free myself when I heard movements. I looked at the recliner across the living room and saw her. Lily was sitting on the recliner, fast asleep. She had her phone in her hand. She was no longer in her lab coat, but was instead in a cute Hello Kitty pajama shirt and pajama pants with cartoons on them. It was so cute that I almost wanted to laugh if I wasn't in such a difficult situation. My stirring must have stirred her too, because she opened her eyes, saw me, and then yelped like she'd been given an electric shock. "Sam! You're awake!" "Lily, what's going on?" I asked, trying to sit up. "Hush!" she snapped, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You're on to me, aren't you? You know what I am." What you are?" "Don't play dumb. You've been coming to the blood donation center almost every other month. You always look at me when I walk by, and you stare at me with that really creepy look. You know I'm a vampire. You were going to kill me. You're some hunter or priest or something." "Wait, you're a what?" I gasped. "A vampire. You knew, so how'd you figure it out?" she demanded. "Holy shit, you're a vampire? I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Bull!" she screamed. "If you didn't know, then why do you keep showing up at the blood donation center? Why are you always staring at me?" Because I like you," I answered. "You what?" "I like you. I was trying to ask you out, Lily," I cried. She paused a moment and blinked in surprise. But then why do you have a stake in your hand to stab my heart? It was a pen! I was going to ask for your number! I shouted. A pen? She looked at the large pen in my pocket and flushed as she realized what it was. It was at this point I realized that maybe Lily wasn't all that bright. But then why didn't you just ask me out then and not sneak up on me in the middle of the night? I couldn't find a time to talk to you, so I was waiting until after work. How was I supposed to know you'd wait until the middle of the night to leave? You could have asked when I got off work, she pointed out smartly. Who gets off work at midnight? I do, she grumbled. So you really didn't know? No! Not until I saw you slurping a blood pack did I have any idea. She blushed deeply and began playing with strands of her hair in embarrassment. You're really a vampire? No! This is, well, it's, I saw you drinking blood. You literally just told me you were a vampire because you thought I was trying to kill you. This, it's a dream, she squealed, jumping up and waving her arms wildly. This is all a crazy dream, and you'll wake up at home, and it's... She groaned and fell back on a recliner, covering her face. I'm an idiot. How could I be so careless? I didn't know what to say. All I could do was stare at this crazy vampire lady who, for the past few months, I'd been aching to ask out. Now I knew what she was, and I knew what her home was like. Normally, I'd be very happy with these circumstances, but considering that the girl I was in love with had a taste for blood, I felt slightly turned off. So, you're a vampire? I asked meekly. She nodded in response, not showing her face. How long have you been one? 19 years, she grumbled. My parents were human, but my dad was a police officer like you. He was shot and killed on the job. Mom OD'd on heroin a few months after he died, and I was put into a foster system. My adopted mom and dad took me in, but they were both vampires. They blooded me the day they took me in and made me like them. That's horrible. Oh, not at all. I mean, I'm glad they did. Being a vampire has lots of advantages and perks that I really don't mind, but I had to swear that I wouldn't reveal what I was to anyone, and now I have. She looked positively heartbroken. I wanted to reach out and hug her, but my hands were still tied by a belt. What happens to you if someone finds out? Oh, nothing. We just have to move. I'd have to go far away. So, wait, you're not going to kill me for knowing or anything? I asked, somewhat relieved. No, of course not. I mean, killing humans is so messy and leaves a trail for hunters and priests to follow. That's why I got a job working at the Red Claws. I mean, I can sometimes sneak a few blood packets out of the cooler before they're shipped out, and I'll be fine for a while. I don't have to kill anybody, see? She said, her story so proudly and excitedly, I could tell she'd rehearsed it for her parents before, likely to make them proud of her and how smart she was for coming up with the idea. And I admit, it was clever, though that really wasn't the point. That's nice, but I meant as in to keep me quiet. Wouldn't you have to kill me to silence me? Oh, right. Well, I mean, who'd believe you, she pointed out. If I moved away and you rant and rave about a vampire you met, everyone will just think you're crazy and no one's the wiser. But if I kill you, then there's a body, which leads to an investigation, which leads to... You, right. I guess that makes sense, I mumbled. So, I'll let you go back home and I'll start packing, she said. No point waiting around, I guess. Now hold on a moment, I snapped. I won't tell anyone, she smiled sadly. That's real nice, but you're a police officer. It's your job to investigate stuff and catch bad guys, right? Vampires drink blood. Eventually, you'll start looking into me and my family. And I won't, I tried to argue. She didn't look convinced, so I tried a different approach. I mean, why would I? Your cover story was really clever, and working for the Red Cross was a great idea to keep your feeding hidden. There's no point in investigating or exposing something that airtight. She swelled with pride like a bullfrog. It was clever, wasn't it? Mom was real worried about it, but Dad was so proud of me. He says he wishes he had the Red Cross blood donation centers around when he was my age. Yeah, see? So you don't have to leave. I want to keep your story safe. But why do you want to, she asked. Is it because... Her eyes suddenly lit up that same familiar pinkish hue that made my stomach churn with butterflies. You mean you really like me? Was that true? I couldn't be entirely sure. On the one hand, my instincts were screaming for me to run from the room and call the insane asylum so that they could pick up a new inmate. This girl, whether a vampire or not, was definitely a little weird. Some sane part of me was telling me to err on the side of caution and just get out while I could. And yet I was again captivated. The way she beamed at me when I'd visit her in the donation center. The sad look in her eye when she realized she'd have to move. The fear on her face when she thought I was out to hurt her. How could I bring myself to hate or resent her? Even if she was a vampire, there was no sense in ridding myself of her when she seemed just as human as anyone else I know. Well, yeah, I like you. I really like you, I answered. She gave me that intoxicating beam once again and flew to me, hugging me excitedly. Oh my god, you're the best! Thank you! You're welcome, but, could you untie me? I pleaded. Oh, right, sorry. And that's the story. So, what did you guys think of Red Cross? While y'all write that, I will go to New Epic and get ready to continue that story. I think we left off... Were we on chapter 24 or 25? I think we're on 25, if I recall correctly. Alright. Glad y'all thought it was interesting. You'll need to hear more. Well, that was just a short story. I didn't write any more than that. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into New Epic Chapter 25. We've been reading New Epic at least 3 or 4 chapters every stream. So we're almost done with what I've written with New Epic, and it'll take me some time to write more. So once we're done with New Epic, we'll take a break from that story while I work on more chapters, and we'll read something else, and we'll decide what that is later. Well, let's go ahead and hit Chapter 25 and get started on that. While I was reading, did anyone else join in? I see that a couple people have just joined in. Aiden, B1, New Cuban was here. Lord Thunder, awesome. Spirit, glad to see you. The Masked One. Mal, glad you're here. Darth Platypus, very nice. Glad to have you all here. All right, let's get started with Chapter 25. All right. Chapter 25. I wrote New Epoch Chapter 25 on July 31st, 2020. All right, here we go. Days were darker, and light seemed an elusive dream. Blemish and Mariel walked on, undeterred but exhausted from the journey through Rotmer, aware at all times that they were being hunted. In the darkest of nights, Blemish was aware of the beasts lurking just out of sight, their growls loud and close. More than once, he had to throw Mariel behind him, sword drawn and ready to fight, only to sheath it again. Mariel wasn't handling the situation well. Her anxiety was getting to her, and there were even 1 or 2 moments she couldn't hide the shivers running up and down her body. Their shoes were soaked, and their legs were tired from trekking through boggy marsh and pools of slime and grime. It was as if they had stepped from a land of plenty into a land of plague. This became more prevalent than Blemish would have liked. Mariel had taken the evening watch. It was now 3 days since the Warg attack, and Blemish was anxious to get up. They were nearly at the edge of Rotmer, and it wouldn't be but another day or 2 before they finally escaped the Nightmare Forest. He rolled over and saw Mariel laying on the ground near the fire pit. She must have fallen asleep during the watch again. Blemish scowled to himself, but tried to remember that she was untrained. She wasn't like him, but then again, who was? He walked to her and nudged her. Mariel, we need to move. Mariel rolled over, groaning, and then Blemish saw her face. She was pale as parchment, and her body was trembling. Her eyes were slightly bloodshot, and her mouth was dry as her tongue hung out slightly, as if trying to catch any moisture she could. She was sick. Very sick. Mariel! I don't feel good, she whimpered. Blemish didn't answer as he placed a hand on her forehead and retracted it fast. She had a high fever, and whatever she was sick with was doing damage to her. He had to get her out of there and fast and get medical treatment from Lovenshire. We need to go, Mariel, he insisted, reaching down and helping her shakily to her feet. Mariel coughed harshly but complied, leaning against Blemish for support. She nearly staggered from them both, and Blemish grimaced as he walked with her.
How far are we from the halflings?
Probably another day's walk. With you like this, it might be 2. Muriel moaned sadly and tried to pick up her pace.
I can make it in a day. I can...
Muriel! She fell forward, hitting the ground hard as her body convulsed. Blemish didn't have much medical training and had no idea what was causing this illness. He was helpless. Once again, Blemish felt all of his years of training and difficulty amount to nothing more than empty and helplessness as he stared at a girl he was duty-bound to protect as she lay suffering at his feet. He began running around her, searching for some way he could help her, finally settling on only one way. He reached down and picked her up, leaning her head against him as he began to run. He had to run as fast as he could. The creatures of the swamp would sense their weakness. Muriel's condition made her easy prey. They had to escape to high ground, if not out of the swamp entirely. But more than anything, Muriel needed a doctor, and there were none in this bog.
I'm sorry,
Muriel whispered. Blemish didn't answer. He wasn't sure how. A part of him wanted to make her feel better by dismissing her apology, but he was frustrated now. The day he thought it would take to get out of the swamp was now longer, and he wouldn't deny he was a bit angry at their situation. Blemish froze and nearly dropped Muriel as a large figure made its way into view. It stood nearly 9 feet tall with bulging muscles and large claw-like hands. It had hairy chest and arms with a long mane of hair going down its back. Its legs were massive black hooves and a long tail trailed behind it. It had a massive head upon its shoulders, which was black with large horns protruding from either side and a bull's maw. It wore nothing to shield its body, and its large fanged teeth dripped bloody menacing.
Minotaur,
Muriel squeaked, having enough energy to be terrified.
We call those Gozuki, Blemish corrected. The Watchers told me about these. They're a type of mutated human with the head of a bovine and no sense of intelligence or rationality. It sounds like a Minotaur to me,
Muriel coughed, trying very hard at light humor, though her shaking voice gave away her true feelings. Blemish drew his swords as the monster charged towards them. Blemish drove out of the way and brought up both swords in an upward swing into the monster's haunches. It bellowed, barely phased, and swung its large arm back, striking Blemish in the side. Blemish rolled and caught himself, shaking the dazed confusion out of his face. Just as he regained his footing, the monster was on top of him again, slamming its massive fist down to crush him. Blemish stabbed upwards as his sword impaled the beast's wrist. It screamed, but didn't stop attacking. Blemish barely escaped the strike. It began to dawn on Blemish why this monster was so terrifying. Mutants had no sense of rationalization or self-preservation. Like zombies, they would attack blindly and fairly. Though they feel pain and it hurts them, they do not let up their attack even for that reason. Blemish's swords would not kill it without hitting the monster in a vulnerable spot. But with its speed and brute power, just getting too close to the cow beast was near suicidal. Blemish adjusted his mask and glanced back at Muriel, who was laying nearby, blinking stupidly as if she were hallucinating, which she likely was. If only the thing were a hallucination, he thought. The creature rounded on Blemish, who danced and dodged, exchanging quick and angry blows, but nothing he did would cause lasting damage. The monster was quite resilient. Gozuki, Minotaur, whatever one called it, it was indeed a frightening fiend. The monster gave a fast, bellowing charge. Blemish plunged his sword into the crown of its skull, hoping to end the beast, but to his surprise, the skull of the monster was harder than the swords could penetrate. "No!" he cried. In the same moment, he felt the full weight of the monster slam into him and crash him into a tree. The tree splintered, and Blemish slumped forward, exhausted and in terrible pain, as blood dripped from his open chest wound. The bellowing beast roared its triumph and grabbed Blemish as if to eat him right there. Blemish tried to grab for his sword up and pluck it from the monster's bleeding head, but he was pinned to the murky forest floor. Was this how it ended?
"Blemish!
Muriel, try to run!" he cried. "Get out of here!" He then faced the monster, taking in its mad and motionless eyes and rank breath, which stank of decay and flesh. He would not shrink from this beast. Let it do its worst. Suddenly, a roar of such ferocity and rage came echoing through the murky bog. A massive red streak dashed from the trees and barreled into the monster. The two forces crashed to the ground together, and Blemish dropped, gasping for air and looking to see what had saved him. She stood nearly 8 feet tall. Her body tinted red, and steam seemed to be drifting from her body as if surrounded in an aura of heat. Her long hair was wild and unclean. Her teeth were bared, showing furious fangs gnashing, and her eyes were glowing red with an incurable anger. A large, sharp horn protruded from her forehead. She might have looked like a demon from the books Blemish had seen as a little boy in the Inquisition library. Though her body still retained a beautiful figure, and her face held a charm that had not diminished, there was no question that this ogre, this demon, this was none other than Titania. Her clothes were in tatters, her muscles tight, blood dried to her body, making her look even more wild than before. She was now a fully mature ogre, and that meant her full strength was awakened, and she was lost in a blood rage. The monstrous minotaur rose to its feet and ran at her. She grabbed the monster by its own horns and began a fierce pushing match between the two, before Titania finally flipped the beast to the ground, leaping on it and pounding it with her fists, punching chunks of bone and flesh clear of its body. The minotaur roared in pain and struck back, hitting Titania hard, who roared in response, and the two engaged in a grapple and flurry of blows and bites that sent Blemish scurrying away from the battle. This was not a fight between warriors, but an animalistic struggle for survival. And Titania was winning. He wasn't surprised, though. He'd seen ogres in the wake of a blood rage do things that could boggle the mind. It's why they were the symbols of the wrath to the Inquisition. The minotaur grabbed her arm and swung her to get her on the ground, but no sooner had he taken her arm than Titania kicked the creature in the chin, seeing it falling backwards into a large rock formation. Titania seized her moment of victory and ran at the monster, tackling him to the rock ground. And then she began hitting it across the face. Again and again, she beat the monster's hideous face with her bare fists, roaring and snarling in rage and in fury, the steam coming off of her body giving a frightening and unholy feel to her. Blemish knew the cause of the steam. Adult ogres in the heat of battle produce an intense heat from the rapid flowing of blood in their bodies, causing their body temperature to skyrocket. Their sweat turns to steam almost instantly, causing an odd steam-like cloud effect around them, leading many to believe that ogres were really just demons. However, in exchange, adrenaline is pumped to the body at incredible speed and in large quantities to make them able to fight longer and with more vigor. The minotaur struggled, taking feeble strikes, but nothing could stop the blood-crazed Titania from beating the monster's head into nothing but a bloody stump on its head. When the monster finally stopped moving, Titania stopped hitting. She let out a bellow and a cheer of victory as the steam began to subside, her red skin fading back to a more natural color, though still slightly reddened. Her horn seemed to shrink down ever so slightly, and her glowing eyes returned to a normal color. Her fangs hid behind her lips, and her large body, now devoid of its more terrifying qualities, was again a woman that Blemish had come to adore. He beamed at the sight of her as she turned to face him. "Mom!" he cried. Titania just stared at him a long moment, not moving and definitely not smiling. Blemish's smile faltered as he suddenly realized that Titania might not be as glad to see them. She just butchered a mutant with her bare hands. Would she even remember him? "Mom, it's me, Blemish." She again stared for a long moment before taking a few steps forward. "Blemish?" she asked. "You're still okay," she gasped. I thought you were just another illusion." Blemish didn't wait. He would suffer the consequences later. He ran at her and swung his arms around her waist in the tightest hug he could provide. His mother was back, and she was alive. Titania slowly placed her arms around Blemish, her smile weak and ashamed, but there. "I'm so glad you're back. I'm so glad you're safe." "None of us are safe in this swamp," Titania explained. "Take Muriel and go. You need to both get out of here now." "You're coming with us," Blemish argued firmly. "Have you seen me, kid?" Titania chuckled. "I don't think the halflings will be happy to see me like this. Or anyone, for that matter." She stepped back to show her full size and appearance. "I think you're still beautiful, Mom," Blemish assured him. "I don't know how I feel about that adjective," Titania grumbled, though she did have a visible blush. "Wait, where's Muriel?" Blemish gasped. Suddenly remembering her, he darted back to where she lay and knelt beside her as she breathed slowly and shallowly. Titania frowned, seeing the sick elf and gasping. "How long has she been like this?" "Since this morning. I don't know what's wrong with her," Blemish admitted. "What do we do, Mom?" Titania didn't hesitate or think twice. She picked up Muriel in her arms and began jogging through the forest. "I'm getting you both out of here. Muriel needs a doctor or she won't last long," she explained. "We're all leaving together," Blemish corrected. Titania glanced down at Blemish, whose mask was now off, showing the look of concern and adoration in his eyes. She bit her lip and slowly nodded. "We'll see. Let's worry about Muriel first. At this rate, she only has a few hours." And that is chapter 25. Let me know what you guys think while I pull up chapter 26. Yes, Aiden, like an Oni. That was the inspiration. All right. Let's see. We can do chapter 26. And then we'll see if we want to do chapter 27 after that, or if we want to take a break and read something else. Because we got a lot. There's a lot of stuff to read. There sure is. How about you, Hannah? You still with me? How are you enjoying it? Aaron, how about you? Haven't heard from you guys in a little while. Alright, well, y'all are getting yourselves ready. We'll go ahead and jump into chapter 26, and after that we will decide if we read more new epic or if we go on to another story. Does Titania consider herself a mother to Blemish? It's complicated. She's not sure if she does or not. Yay, Hannah's still here. Hope you're still enjoying. Raven, have you ever played League of Legends? No. Alright, let's get started. Chapter 26. I wrote this August 24th, 2020. Blemish was beside himself. In the Inquisition, asking questions was never a good thing. It was a good way to make the higher-ups suspicious of you, and that was never healthy. But ever since meeting Titania and her friends, he'd had questions, and nothing but questions. Now, as he ran through the dense bog of Raptor, new ones were emerging. What sickness was Muriel suffering from, and how did she get it? How had Titania managed to regain her senses so quickly? Most mature ogres lost all sense of self for longer than this. What had changed? And what waited in Lovenshire? He knew it was a land of halflings and the occasional dwarf, but he had a strange sensation in the back of his mind. A sense of foreboding that told him there was something more to Lovenshire than that. Lovenshire had no military or force to defend itself. The dwarves south of their lands offered protection in exchange for commercial goods. But the dwarves, strong as they were, wouldn't risk their military strength against the monsters of Raptor. So how did the halflings defend their homes against those monsters like the Gozuki? The questions he was toiling over vanished with the retching sound of Mariel, who had just vomited. Titania paused her running and helped Mariel bend over to finish, worried as her knees buckled. She's getting worse, Titania whispered. We don't have time. I won't let her die. I can't. We've only a few hours away from Lovenshire, Blemish offered. If we sprint and try to... Hold on, Titania snapped, frustrated with the puke on her arms from where Mariel had been unable to aim her vomit. She scooped her back up and held her close to keep her warm as she was shivering violently. If I go running out of these woods looking like I do, the halflings will hide from us before they try to help us. Then what do we do? Blemish asked. Blemish, you have to go on ahead of me. Run to the exit of Raptor and inform the halflings of the situation. Tell them we need help immediately. I'll come behind you 20 minutes after you, and please, Blemish, you have to convince them to help us. Blemish felt his eyes widen and his blood run cold. He had to do the talking? Mom, I'm no good at this stuff yet. I'm not the best at... If I go out there, they won't listen to me. And even if they did, you can't carry Mariel there fast enough. You have to do it. Blemish stood still a moment before finally reaching up and hugging his mom's neck, causing her to wince, but then relax and accept it. I'll try. I promise I'll try, he answered. He then turned without another word and flew through the swamp, his legs kicking up muck and his lungs pumping air in and out with a fast and unstoppable rhythm to ensure maximum efficiency. As he ran, Titania hefted Mariel in her arms and continued her jog through the swamp to get her out. Mariel had no objections. Her eyes were closed and she was mumbling weakly, unable to even see what was going on around her. Blemish was fast, easily faster than most boys his age, which was not surprising since his half-elf blood gave him light feet and quick reflexes to evade and dodge the brambles and logs that stood between him and Lovenshire. By the time he saw the light of day cutting through the thick mist of the mire, he was breathing heavy, but his pace had not faltered or slowed. When he neared the tree line, he stopped at last and knelt down, looking just beyond the dark and gnarled trees to the bright and open fields beyond. Lovenshire was not a bustling land with lots of broken-down houses and city ruins to make up its lands. It was an open and luscious ground, in stark contrast to the swamp Blemish had just escaped. The land was filled with grass, trees, and mud hills. Some rumors persisted that Lovenshire had emerged from the cataclysm better than it had been before. The halflings who lived there believed it was because they simply didn't dare to ruin what was untouched. Blemish recalled some folks referring to the local halflings as something called hippies. The name was strange, and definitely derogatory, but he didn't have time to think on what it might mean. He stepped out of the shadows and tasted sunlight on his skin for the first time in what felt like a year. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. He buckled under his heart involuntarily. He buckled under its heat involuntarily, and quietly felt a longing for the chill of shade again. Why did the sun burn so brightly now? It was no different than any other time he felt it, right? Or was it perhaps that the swamp before had taught him to appreciate the sun more than before? There was definitely evil in those trees. No sooner had he finished telling himself these things than he saw movement. A pair of children were running through the grass dressed in cloth and linen. One wore a strange sort of hat on his head, and their ears were rather large and easily noticeable. They were smiling and chattering with each other when they stopped at the sight of Blemish, their faces going white with fear. "Please," Blemish whispered, trying to sound calm and collected. "I need help." "Mom!" the two children cried, running as fast as they could from Blemish. Blemish chased after them, but then stopped. It wouldn't look good if he was chasing two innocent children like a killer or a predator. But he didn't let them out of his sight either. He'd follow them at least so he could see where the nearby settlement was. It wasn't long until he spotted from the top of a mud hill. The two children left long trails in the green grass, which went all the way to a small collection of gardens, doors, and walkways that intersected into the mud hill like ant passageways. Blemish had heard it said that halflings were small, but preferred to live in tight and close spaces like caves or burrows. Something about the tight space made them feel comfortable. A halfling in a large open area would get antsy quickly. As the children neared the area of doors and gardens, a few other halflings began to emerge, all older than the children, but looking no more tall or even that much more physically aged. Halflings age at half the rate of a normal human, much like an elf. As a result, they were often called the child race, because even their adults looked like children compared to a human. They were all short to Blemish at any rate. As he drew close to a small group of halflings were coming across the grass towards him, all carrying what appeared to be makeshift weapons of picks, hoes, and axes. As they stepped close to about 50 meters of him, he waved at them threateningly. "You get lost, Outlander!" one shouted, his high voice sounding oddly funny, as if from an elderly man with helium in his lungs. "We don't want your kind here! Be gone with you! We're happy enough without you people!" Blemish ignored them and took a few careful steps forward. His legs were beginning to ache from his walking, but he stood straight and proud. "My name is Blemish, and I need your help." "Well, you better keep going then, Blemish," the first halfling snapped. "You won't get any help from us." "It's not for me," Blemish corrected. "A friend of mine is sick and dying. She'll be here any minute. She needs help." At this news, 2 or 3 of the halflings lowered their weapons, slightly surprised. One with a slightly trimmed beard and stepped forward. "What are her symptoms?" "Throwing up, weakness, coughing, and hallucinations. She's been sick for a day, I think, at the most." "Did she catch it in Rotmore?" he continued. "Ezekiel," one halfling snarled. "Hold your tongue." Clearly, the other halflings weren't too fond of Ezekiel's desire to know more. "Well, I can't ignore someone dying, can I?" he asked. "It's a trick. Outsiders always try to trick us," another one argued. "I'm not trying to trick you, I swear it." "Then take off your mask and drop your weapons." Blemish stood frozen in a place for a long moment, unmoving and unflinching as his mind processed the command. Disarming was easy enough. He was able to fight them even without weapons, if necessary. But the mask. All archangels in the Inquisition had masks. They weren't about hiding an identity, it was about creating one. They were the deliverers of God's wrath on earth, instruments of death, swords to be wielded from on high. The mask they were to wear represented to themselves and to the world their status as blades. Unfeeling, not human, not something that could be reasoned with or bargained with, simply a force of pure destruction. Some archangels never removed the mask unless to eat. In some cases, the wearers forgot their own names, simply carving new names or symbols into their wooden or iron masks. In the few years that Blemish had been an archangel, he too had begun to forget himself, seeing himself as only a weapon. But Titania had begun to change all that. That's why he could take it off around her. She was different. She was giving him something new to be, something special to hold on to his own. But she wasn't here. Could he dare to let go of his shield while away from her? "Well?" the halfling demanded. Blemish undid the latches to his swords and tossed them to the ground to show his willingness to comply, but his hand rested as it stopped a foot away from his face to remove the mask. He muttered, trying to find the words to say. He thought about his mother and Mariel. Mariel was dying. If he couldn't win their trust, what would happen to her? "Do not remove it. You are no one without the mask. While you wear it, you are indestructible. Without it, what are you? Just a blemish." His hand shook, finally gripping the mask with his fingers, feeling its cold steel in his flesh. He grit his teeth and with all his might finally unlatched the mask before those strangers, exposing the blemish beneath it. The halfling stared at him a moment, as if watching a great struggle taking place before their eyes. He finally put the mask by his side and opened his eyes to gaze at them carefully. "Okay. Do I earn your trust now? He asked. The halfling named Ezekiel walked forward, holding out his hand.
Call me Ezekiel. I was a vet before the cataclysm. I still remember a few things, though I'm not a replacement for a real doctor. Where's this friend of yours?
Blemish reached out and took his hand to shake. She's coming soon out of the swamp. My mother is carrying her.
Your mother?
The halfling asked. My mother is an ogress. She's strong enough to... At the word ogress, the halfling suddenly went pale and backed away fast, as if uttering a curse.
An ogress? Your mother is...
She's harmless, Plymouth snapped. He fell to his knees and bowed his head desperately. Don't turn us away, please, please. He whimpered those words as if they were the magical power to mend any fearful thoughts that the halflings bore towards Titania. They looked no less frightened, but they didn't turn away either. Ezekiel coughed roughly, but then stepped a few paces closer.
Fine, just have her come here, not into town. It's safer that way.
Blemish didn't look up at them, making Ezekiel more uncomfortable.
You don't need to keep bowing, kid. We'll help. We'll help you.
But Blemish couldn't look up. If he did, they'd see the tears he was shedding. And that was Chapter 26. All right, Chapter 26. Let me know what you guys thought of that in the chat. I'll switch it over, and we'll decide if we do Chapter 20. Oh, I didn't even notice. We got a donation, $19.99 from Legion with a wolf emoji. Thank you for the $19.99. Much appreciated. And Daniel is here. Woo! Glad you're here, Daniel. Glad you are here. I'm sure you're still working and burning that midnight oil. I really appreciate you listening, bro. It's awesome. It's awesome. This is your first time at one of the reading streams, I think. So you're catching us in the middle of our new Epoch series, so that's awesome, man. Hope you enjoy it. We'll talk about it sometime when I'm back at work. Let me know, Daniel, will you be working Thursday? Because that's when I'm going in for my Bible study. That'd be awesome to see you. What book is that? This is New Epic. This is I'm reading my books. These are my stories, like ones that I've written. So you're probably here. So all these stories that you're hearing are all stories that I have written or created. So basically what this whole stream is me reading you my stories. To give you an idea of how I write, the things that I create. Like, it's just to chill out and have fun. So, the question must be asked. Do we read the next chapter of New Epic, or do we read Monster Club? Or would you rather we read something else? Let me know in the chat. I need to take a drink. Got a request for Raptor Girls next. Okay. Monster Club. Got a request for Monster Club. Cool. Waiting to hear more. Another Monster Club. Okay. Monster Club. Monster Club. Okay. Let me go ahead and pull up Monster Club then, since that seems to be what people want. Okay. Pulling it up. Sure, Daniel had to go back to work, but it's all good. I'm glad that Daniel dropped by. If you do come back, Daniel, let me know in chat. Alright, looks like Monster Club is winning the vote, so we will go with Monster Club. Where on earth did we leave off? I think we left off. Did we leave on chapter 5? Oh, wait, we left off with Solomon revealing that he knew what Abraham was doing. Yep, so we're on chapter 5. Cool. Alright. Hey, Raven, do the OG Jurassic Park characters exist in the Monster Girl universe? You'll see. We'll get to that. Alright, so let's get started. Everyone ready? Alright, Monster Club. Now, I will remind you guys, this chapter right here was written in January 17th, 2013. So this was a long time ago, literally about 11 years ago. So it is old. It is an old story, back when I was not as good a writer. So you'll notice some errors in my writing and style, but I hope you still like it. Alright, here we go. Monster Club Chapter 5. Sorry, I had to clear my throat again. I'm a little sick. The sun was high in the sky now. The overcast sky seemed to be brightening now as the lake shimmered with the sun's glow. The inside of the house seemed to brighten under the sun. Abraham was rather impressed by the appearance of it. It hardly seemed like a house of monsters and ghouls anymore. Solomon continued to stare up at Abraham, expecting him to speak. Abraham was slightly nervous. Solomon had told him to stop digging into the fate of Katie, and he had disobeyed, but now he was saying that he wanted Abraham to do it. How did that make any sense? I don't understand. You actually wanted me to investigate the disappearance of Katie? Abraham asked. Solomon nodded. Yes, I did. Then why did you try to stop me earlier? Solomon said, laughing heartily at him. I wasn't trying to stop you. I was only trying to strengthen your resolve and feed your curiosity, Solomon explained. I wanted to see how far you'd be willing to go to find out the truth about her, and I must say that I'm impressed with your resolve. Now, share what you've learned with me, and I'll try my best to fill in the blanks for you. Abraham smiled, happy that he wasn't in any trouble. Well, here's what I've got, Abraham began. He walked over to the couch next to Solomon's armchair and sat down as he spoke. Katie was one of the monsters here, just like you all. She lived in my room up until a week ago when she was kidnapped. None of you know who kidnapped her or how, but your suspicion points to some sort of new weapon that the humans developed, or for the purpose of capturing monsters, I guess. And this weapon is unknown, and everyone's terrified of it, and supposedly only Asher stands a chance of finding her, so that's why he goes out all the time looking for her. Abraham finished speaking, and Solomon only smiled in amusement. I dare say, my boy, you could make a decent detective, Solomon laughed. You have done an excellent job of digging up the truth, although you missed a few key details. That's what I wanted to bring up, Abraham said quickly. Michelle said she gave me a clue, but I don't understand its meaning. I'm sure that I could figure it out more if I just knew what the clue was. Well, what was it? Solomon asked encouragingly. She said that I was looking in the wrong places. She told me to try looking at where the problem began. When he said the last word, Solomon sighed and shook his head. No, not where it began. He said, when it begins, Solomon whispered. Why does that make any difference? Solomon tutted to himself and leaned back. Well, it's a riddle, Abraham. Everything makes a difference in a riddle. Okay, so what does it mean? Where does she want me to look? Abraham pressed. Solomon set down his book and folded his arms across his chest. She said you were looking in the wrong place, Abraham. But she tells you to look when it begins. That implies a moment in time, that something starts, not a location. Her clue is a moment in time, Solomon corrected. Abraham gasped and slapped his own forehead in realization. Okay, so the clue is a certain time, but what time does she mean? Abraham asked. Solomon closed his eyes and his brow furrowed. He seemed deep in thought. He was grinning, though, and he was chuckling to himself. Well, I can't hold your hand the whole way, young inspector. Try and figure it out yourself. Abraham nodded and began to think hard. He now knew, thanks to the two key words, place and when, that Michelle's clue was a point in time, and the other clue was the word begins. Okay. The time period she's talking about is talking about when something happens, not when something began. So if something begins, that means that it happened repeatedly, right? Abraham pressed. Solomon nodded. You're correct. Abraham continued to ponder and consider everything. His mind was on overdrive as he thought hard about the clue. So she said when the problem begins. So she means that the problem began at a certain time of day, right? Solomon didn't answer, but his smile widened a little. Abraham was excited. He was closing in on the answer, and then he saw it. The question he'd been missing. Michelle had given him a question to figure out, not just a riddle. She said that I should look to when the problem begins. The problem was that Katie was kidnapped, and begins implies that it was a time of day. So now the only thing I need to discover is... He leaned forward and faced Solomon seriously, a grin on his face. At what time of day did Katie go missing? Solomon let out a laugh and clapped his hands happily. My boy, you did it. Well done. Well done. You figured out the riddle. Abraham couldn't hold back a big smile. He had never been praised by a ghost before, but it felt strangely nice. Solomon chuckled and nodded his head. Yes, Asher discovered Katie's room to be empty at dawn that morning. That was the moment our problem began. You could also make the argument that the dawn is the beginning of a problem for all monsters, as most monsters are nocturnal creatures. But you came to that answer in a most clever way. I'll have to praise Michelle later for coming up with such a good riddle. But what does it tell me? Abraham asked. I mean, so I know the time of day she was taken. What does that tell me? Solomon's smile faded and he looked down at his feet. It tells you who we believe to be Katie's abductors, Solomon said coldly. How? Abraham asked. Solomon opened his mouth to speak when suddenly there was a crash. Abraham and Solomon spun to see Tamil burst into the room. His pale eyes were wild and he was breathing heavily. People coming this way, he panted in exhaustion. Solomon rose to his feet, as did Abraham.
We'll continue this later, Abraham. Right now, I need your help, Solomon barked. He spun to face Tamil. How many are there, and how far away?
There are 3. Michelle say wearing fancy suits. They, I think, 3 minutes away, Tamil gasped.
Solomon nodded. Then we still have time. Go find Michelle and tell her to meet you at the front door. Then go to Calypso and instruct her to dry herself off and get inside immediately.
Tamil turned and rushed out the door to do as he was told. Abraham quickly jumped in. What about me, sir? Abraham asked.
Solomon glanced at him and smirked. I think you have a new job for you to do, boy, but you'll have to play along with Michelle.
Solomon quickly walked to the front of the house with Abraham close behind him. Not 30 seconds later, Michelle was at the front door, looking dirty and frantic. I'm here. Tamil said what was going on. What's the plan? Solomon turned from her and reached into a closet by the stairs. He pulled out 2 baseball gloves and tossed them to Michelle and Abraham. He then handed Abraham a baseball bat.
You know how to handle this, Michelle. Do what you have to. Just don't let them inside the house until I've given the all clear, Solomon said fiercely.
Michelle nodded and grabbed Abraham by the hand. What's he talking about? Abraham shouted. I don't understand what you're doing. Michelle didn't respond. Instead, she ran to the front yard and made Abraham stand in place. She then backed away from him and held up the glove like a baseball player would. What does it look like we're doing, bro? Just 2 siblings playing catch, right? Abraham stared at her in confusion and disbelief. Bro? Siblings? Catch? What was all that about? However, he thought back to how Solomon had told him to play along with Michelle. So that's what he did. He picked up the ball and threw it at Michelle. Her reflexes were flawless as she snatched the ball out of the air and chucked it back to Abraham.
Excuse us.
Abraham and Michelle stopped and turned around. Walking down the yard were 3 men in very formal business attire. They looked like lawyers or people of some sort, political authority maybe. They smiled as they walked closer. Michelle grinned and waved kindly. Abraham's jaw must dropped in her sudden change of attitude and demeanor. Hello there, Michelle cried out girlishly. Hi, Abraham responded nervously. The strangers nodded and one of them leaned down to look in Abraham's eyes.
So what are you kids up to? He asked.
Michelle walked forward and put her arm around my shoulders playfully. Oh, we're just playing catch. You want to join in? The man shook his head but never lost his smile.
Actually, we're here on business. Is your father around?
Abraham started to speak up that they were orphans, but Michelle broke in first. Oh, Dad isn't feeling too well at the moment. The doctor says it's a flu, but if you ask me, Dad's too tough for the flu bug. Still, doctor says he needs rest. If you'd like to leave a message, I'll see that he gets it. Abraham couldn't believe just how convincing Michelle sounded. It was as if she'd been born as 2 different people. Her lie sounded natural, and he himself almost believed her. The adults looked from one to the other, clearly unsure as to what to do. The one in front coughed and shook his head.
I'm afraid that we have to speak to your father personally. It's about the house.
He pulled out a folder from inside of his coat.
I'm afraid that he needs to see these.
Michelle's face suddenly darkened. Abraham could feel anger building up behind her face. Well, I told you he's not feeling well. Why don't you come back later?
We can't, kid. Now if you'll...
The lawyer stopped talking and looked up at the house. Michelle and Abraham spun to look and see, and couldn't help but stare. Walking towards them up the lawn was a figure. He had on a dark hood covering his head and a leather jacket over that. His hands were stashed in his pockets of his dark jeans, and his boots squished loudly on the wet grass. Abraham couldn't quite make out his face, but he was too short to be Solomon, and too tall to be Tamil. Who was it?
Hello, are you the father of these children?
Not really. More of a big brother, the figure said. As my kid's sister probably told you, the old man doesn't want any visitors today, so you're going to have to leave and come back later. Abraham recognized the voice. It was Asher. But it was the middle of the day. What was he doing out in the sun? The lawyer seemed unfazed by Asher's remark.
Now listen here, young man, the man said fiercely. You're probably too young to understand the details of this, but our client is very interested in this property, and seeing as how the original owner has long since passed away and no will has been presented, we're here to...
Asher raised his head up slightly so that his face could be just barely seen, and Abraham couldn't help but squirm when he saw Asher's eyes. To do what, exactly? Asher asked. The lawyer tried to speak, but he seemed tongue-tied. He couldn't pull his gaze away. It was like his eyes were locked on Asher's. Abraham looked up at Asher's eyes, and it was unbelievable. Abraham suddenly felt an unbelievable peace wash over his body. He felt so warm, so happy. It was like nothing he'd ever felt before. His muscles relaxed. His body felt so pleasant. He couldn't look away from Asher's glowing crimson eyes. He would do anything for him. Whatever he was told, he would do without hesitation. Why did he feel like this? What was wrong with him? Nothing is wrong. It was Asher's voice. It was so clear, so deep in his mind that he couldn't possibly ignore it. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a command. It was law. Nothing is wrong, Abraham muttered. What was wrong? Who cared? If he said that there was nothing wrong, then the wrong never existed. Everything is fine. Everything is fine, Abraham repeated stupidly. Abraham! Abraham! Suddenly, Abraham felt his body being jerked back to reality. His eyes were being covered by Michelle. What had just happened? He looked up and saw that Michelle was protecting his eyes. What? I don't never look directly at Asher's eyes when he does that, Michelle hissed. Abraham was about to ask why, but he quickly realized that he didn't need to. He looked up at the scene before him. The three lawyers were standing slack, as if their muscles had fallen asleep, and they were only just barely standing up. They couldn't look away from Asher, whose eyes were boring into theirs. They must have been trapped under the gaze like he had been. What happened to me? The same thing that happened to them, Michelle hissed, indicating the zombie-like lawyers. What's he done? Abraham gasped. Are they under some kind of obedience spell or something? It's vampiric hypnosis, Michelle explained. Asher has the power to manipulate the mind and memories of other people using his gaze. Problem is, it affects anyone who looks at his eyes. You're lucky I was here. You'd be as brain dead as our guests. Abraham nodded as Michelle spoke. He knew that vampires were powerful, and he knew that Asher was strong even before he saw that Asher was a vampire, but he had no idea just how strong Asher really was. What other powers did Asher have that he didn't know about? In fact, what powers and skills did the others have that he wasn't aware of? They were monsters, after all. As he thought these things over, though, the scene before him continued to unfold. I'm afraid that your services are no longer required, gentlemen, Asher said in that same deep and hypnotizing voice. Please leave immediately, and don't ever darken our doorstep again. Abraham knew all too well what these lawyers must have been feeling, and if he was right, then he knew what would happen next. And as such, the lawyers, still stiff as boards, smiled strangely and nodded. Yes, they muttered, we'll leave immediately. Abraham caught a glimpse of Asher's face, and he saw that Asher was grinning, exposing his fangs. Excellent. Now go. With those last words, the lawyers turned on their heels and started marching away quickly. They couldn't wait to follow through with their orders. Once they were well out of sight, Asher groaned and turned to walk back towards the house. Phew, nice work, Asher, Michelle said kindly with a smirk. Asher grunted. I'm going back to bed. Being out in the sun is exhausting, even with my body covered up. Abraham watched him walk towards the house and couldn't help but feel a great deal of respect and a hint of fear. Asher was definitely a creature not to cross. No wonder everyone thought he was the only one to save Katie. The sun's fatal to Asher, Michelle explained. He can't take direct sunlight or he'll burn. If he wants to go outside in the sun, he has to cover himself in clothing to keep from being burned. But even doing that weakens him. That's why he seems so gloomy all the time. Normally, he's not quite that sullen. Abraham nodded. By the way, nice job today. You played your part pretty well. What exactly did I do besides get caught in Asher's gaze? Abraham asked. Asher's job is to protect the house and keep people away. However, during the day, he has to sleep. Since I was the only one who could appear human during the day, I keep an eye on things during the day, and sometimes I have to pretend to be someone I'm not to make them leave. Oh, right, I see, Abraham said, starting to understand her work a little bit better. That's why you said we were brother and sister. You were just trying to sell the illusion? Michelle nodded. You catch on quick, she laughed. Now, I have work to get done. Go inside and tell the old man that the coast is clear. She turned on her heels and walked off, leaving Abraham to go back to the house alone. Asher's back in bed, so I assume everything went well? Solomon asked. Abraham walked inside and flopped down on the couch. Solomon looked at him and then moaned. I'm still new to all this. It's a lot to take in at once. I assume that you saw Asher use his powers. Saw? I fell victim to them. Abraham moaned. Solomon chuckled and smiled. Well, no need to worry. We always get lawyers and realtors around here looking to take this house and sell it, Solomon explained. Why, though? You still live here. Living? Have you forgotten what I am? My soul remains, but my body is currently buried in a local cemetery, Solomon laughed. I'm afraid that after my death, several people were very interested in purchasing my land and home. But I could never part with it. Didn't you leave it to anyone? Abraham asked. Solomon nodded in reply, but his face seemed to fall a little. I left it to my son, William, he said. I left it all to him, but he doesn't know this. Why not? Abraham asked. What would you say if your father told you that you had just inherited a house full of misfit monsters who have no home of their own? Abraham grimaced at the thought. Okay, I guess that could be a good point, Abraham said. Besides, hopefully I can one day tell him about this place, if I just knew where to find him. Solomon seemed a little distracted at this point. It was like he was talking more to the house than Abraham now. While he didn't want to break the moment, Abraham still wanted to know something, and he had to know it now. Solomon, sir, Abraham muttered, before that incident outside, you said that the time of day Katie was kidnapped was a clue to her abductors. Solomon nodded darkly, and there was a look of danger and concern in his eyes. Well, it's not a clue, boy. It's who they are, he said coldly. They call themselves the Dawnbringers. They are an organization of the most efficient and ruthless monster hunters that have been causing hell for all supernatural creatures for centuries. They use weapons and tactics that we not only fear, but we find to be rather inhumane. The reason I said I wasn't sure if her abductors were human is because I'm not sure if they even meet that qualification. They're more like monsters themselves. There was a deafening silence that fell over the room as Solomon spoke these words. It was like the warm house suddenly went cold, and that a strange and eerie sadness had taken over them. And you think they took Katie? Abraham asked. My boy, I know they took her. And that is Chapter 5 of The Monster Club. Shall we press on to Chapter 6? Let me know what you think. Okay, so let's see. Hypnosis scares me. I get it. Have you considered writing a TTRPG like Dungeons & Dragons or something? You'd be very good at writing and seem to have a pretty good idea of game balance. Or possibly making a video game. I've thought about stuff like that. I've created a world that my brother uses for his Dungeons and Dragons stuff, so there's that. Get another drink. So, Hannah, Aaron, Danielle, y'all still there? Just let me know in chat. All right. Oh, I got a message. Hold on. Need to check it out. Okay. That's fine. Never mind. All right. Here we go. Chapter 6 of Monster Club. Wrote this one on January 23rd, 2013. Ah, Hannah's the only one left, huh? Okay. After the conversation with Solomon, Abraham went up to his room and lay down. He stared up at the ceiling from his bed and considered all that had been going on. So many thoughts and feelings flooded his consciousness, most of them about the strange group of monsters he now had to live with. Though he was starting to like them, he couldn't help but think of them as monsters or something subhuman. Something deep down told him this was a cold stereotype, almost as if he was being somewhat racist. But he simply couldn't help his thoughts. After all, he barely knew them. A dryder that is open and friendly and likes to sew clothes. A werewolf girl who is strong and loyal leader of her family. A shy and timid mermaid with a little girl's crush. A vampire with unbelievable power and intimidating abilities. And finally, a young mummy with a sense of humor and a few secrets of his own. Top it all off with a ghost who owns an old lake house that several potential buyers are interested in. You've got one very strange but oddly interesting group of misfit monsters. What have I got myself into? Abraham muttered. All this is happening so fast, I'm not sure what to do. Abraham rolled over in bed and listened to the sounds around the house. Despite his fatigue, he couldn't sleep. There was too much on his mind. There was a knock at the door. Who is it? Abraham called. Suddenly the door opened up and Abraham had to stifle a scream of terror. In, on all 8 legs, walked Sarah. He still was trying to get over the shock of her appearance. It's not easy to simply overlook a beautiful young girl with spider legs. Sarah was smiling, her fangs glinting against the light of the overhead light. She beamed and scuttled over to Abraham. Her hands were behind her back as if hiding something. How are you, Abraham? She asked. Abraham shrugged. Still getting used to the house, he admitted. Sarah giggled. I'll admit, it was all a little strange at first for me too, but you'll get used to it over time. Sarah grinned and suddenly pulled her hands out from behind her and showed Abraham what she'd been hiding. In her hands were a long and lovely jacket. It was blue with a silver stripe running through the chest, and another one running down the sleeves. It was so nice. Sarah, what is that? Abraham asked. It's a jacket, you silly, Sarah giggled. It's yours. Would you try it on? Abraham took the jacket from her hands and he threw it off his own dirty and mud-splattered one. He slipped on the new blue jacket and suddenly felt a smooth sensation all over his body. The inside of the jacket, and likely the outside as well, were made of pure silk. It felt unbelievably smooth to the touch, and it hugged his body nightly. The arm length and the sides of the jacket were all perfect. It felt wonderful on his body. Sarah, it fits perfect. It feels so good. Well, of course it does, Sarah said with a proud smile. I made it with my own silk. Abraham stopped and stared at her, then at her abdomen. Suddenly, the jacket had a very different feel on his body. So you mean the material in this jacket came out of your butt? He cried. Sarah burst out into a fit of laughter that even made Abraham grin a little. That was something he noticed about Sarah. No matter what, she was always so happy and joyful. It was uplifting, especially considering all that he'd been through. No, Sarah cackled. My silk comes from the silk glands at the base of my spine, just at the tip of my abdomen, just like any spider. Abraham blushed and rubbed the smooth jacket. Sorry, Abraham said sheepishly. Sarah waved it aside. Don't worry about it, Sarah said with a smile. Tamil picks on me about that all the time, too. Do you make clothes for the others? Abraham asked. Sarah nodded. Oh, all the time, in fact. But do you like your new jacket? Sarah asked. Abraham pulled on it and felt how strong it was, and then admired how nice it felt on his body, and how smooth the material was. It was a wonderful jacket. It's remarkable. How did you make it so quickly? Abraham asked. Sarah blushed and smiled, flexing her arms a little. You're looking at the best weaver ever, and I can make clothes lickety-split, Sarah said gladly. But she can't clean her room in an hour. Sarah and Abraham spun to the door to see Michelle standing by the entrance. She was grinning at the two of them. Sarah beamed and turned to face Michelle, and Michelle looked at Abraham and then back to Sarah. I just wanted to tell you both that supper is almost ready. Abraham's eyes went shocked. Supper? Sarah and Michelle both stared at him. Well, yeah. We may not be human, but we still eat, Michelle said stiffly. Abraham shook his head. Oh, of course, I knew that, but I didn't realize that you guys all ate together, Abraham said. Sarah and Michelle exchanged glances. Of course we eat together. We're a family, Michelle said. Abraham nodded at this and considered the obvious fact. Sorry, I didn't think that monsters could be social, Michelle finished coldly. Well, today's just full of surprises for you, isn't it? Michelle, Sarah moaned, please be nice. He's still getting used to us. Michelle sighed and nodded her head in understanding. Regardless, it is supper time. Come on. Michelle walked away from the door and vanished. Sarah turned to face Abraham, a sad look on her face. I'm really sorry about that, Abraham, she said. No, I'm the one who should be sorry, Abraham admitted. Sarah grinned and moved to the door. Well, are you coming? She asked. Abraham nodded and hurried after Sarah as she walked towards the steps. Oh, Sarah, Michelle had turned around to face him from the bottom of the stairs. I didn't wake Asher. Could you get him, please? Sarah almost turned, but Abraham stopped short quickly. Go ahead. I'll get him, Abraham said. Sarah smiled her gratitude and rushed downstairs. Abraham, meanwhile, spun to face the door that Asher had vanished into a while ago and pushed it open carefully. The inside of the room was quiet, unlike Sarah's. It wasn't quite as large, but there was still plenty of room to move around in. It was rather dusty and dark, but with very little light to speak of except for the setting sun that glowed through the window and out the wall. Abraham turned to see where the bed in the room was, but there didn't seem to be one. There was a great amount of room in the place, but the only furniture was a closet, a dresser, and a small refrigerator. At the far end of the room, there was a large box that looked longer than Abraham was tall. He walked closely and suddenly discovered what it was. A coffin. Abraham hissed in horror at the sight. It was indeed a coffin, and Abraham quickly remembered the stories he'd heard that vampires slept in them. Could Asher be sleeping in that? What would he do if he opened the coffin? Would Asher be mad? However, at the moment, he knew that Michelle was in a bad mood, and he would rather not make her mad. He walked over to the coffin and knocked on the lid. Hey, Asher, it's supper time. There was no response from within the large black coffin. Abraham began to question whether it was really his bed or not. There was only one way to know for sure. Abraham placed his hands along the lid and pulled open the lid. He leapt away, expecting to see a very pissed vampire jump out at him, but nothing happened. Abraham dared to look into the coffin to find that there was nothing there. Nobody was inside it. Abraham looked down over the coffin to see what might be in it. Can I help you? Yeah! Abraham nearly jumped 5 feet in the air as he jumped backwards, falling up against a hard object right behind him, causing him to leap forward again in terror. He spun quickly around to see a very familiar figure standing there. Asher was standing behind him, standing in nothing but dark jeans and his cross necklace. His feet and his chest were bare, and his hair was a bit of a mess. His red eyes were boring into him curiously. Abraham felt torn between wanting to run away and stand his ground. "I said, can I help you, Abraham?" Asher asked. Abraham opened his mouth to speak, but just as he was about to talk, the door opened up. "Abraham, what is taking you so—" Michelle stopped speaking when she saw Asher standing there in front of him and grinned. "Well, look who's finally among the living." "Funny, did you spend all day coming up with that one?" Asher asked. Michelle shook her head and turned to leave. "You want to throw something over your chest so you can join us for supper?" Michelle asked. "I'd say you could just come down as you are, but I think it might give Calypso a heart attack." She then walked out, leaving Abraham alone with a half-naked and blushing vampire. "Anyway, is there something you wanted?" Asher asked as he walked to his dresser and began pulling out shirts. "No, just let me guess. Michelle asked you to come and wake me up, didn't she?" Abraham could only nod. He was still shaken from the scare Asher brought him. "Well, you can head on down for supper. I'll be down in just a minute." Abraham started to leave, but then paused and looked at Asher. He couldn't help but notice the sleeplessness behind his eyes. He was tired. And he was sad. "Asher, I know about Katie." Asher suddenly stiffened and his eyes widened. His red eyes seemed to ignite and turn to rest on him. "Do you?" Asher asked. "Yeah, she's the one you've been searching for, right?" Abraham said nervously. Asher looked back down at his fist clenched in frustration. "That's correct." Asher snarled. "I almost closed in on those damn bastards. If that storm hadn't come on when it did." "Asher, who are the Dawnbringers? Are they really that strong?" Asher closed his eyes and breathed slowly. "The less you know about them, the better, Abraham. Don't worry about it, okay? This is for me to worry about." "Why you? Come on, supper's waiting," Asher said. He threw on a black t-shirt and walked to the door. Abraham could tell there was much more on Asher's mind and that the poor creature was exhausted. But there was no point in pressing the matter now. Abraham was quite interested to see what supper was like for this family. The kitchen was a lot brighter than it had been the last time he had been in it. There was also food everywhere. There was normal food like spaghetti and salad, but there were also some other things that he didn't believe belonged to the table. There was a bottle of wine, although no one looked older than 19 or 20. There was also a raccoon that had appeared to be frozen in place as if petrified. There was raw steak that looked a little bit. Sorry, I've got something in my throat. Sorry. There was a raw steak that looked a little bit more like a bloody platter sitting on a table, and there was also different sushi and fish delicacies. There was no theme. There was no rhyme or reason. What was with half of these dining options? Everyone was taking their seats at the table, with the exception of Sarah, who seemed to be hanging from the ceiling like a spider. "Abraham, you're sitting beside Tamil and Solomon," Michelle said, pointing to an empty chair. Abraham walked around the table and sat down. Tamil smiled and Solomon nodded in his direction. Michelle looked around the table and saw that everyone was there and grinned. "All right, Solomon. All here." Solomon smiled in reply. "Abraham, in this household, it is a tradition that we say grace before eating." Abraham nodded his understanding and bowed his head along with everyone else. "Father, we thank you for this meal that you prepared for us. We pray that you will strengthen us and guide us in days to come. Also, as you know, there is one of us missing from our number tonight." Abraham couldn't help but feel a wave of emotion sweep over the table as this phrase was said. "Please keep her safe and bring her back to us in one piece, if it be your will. Bless this food, and in your name we pray. Amen." As he said the final words, movements could be felt around the table as everyone began to dig in. Abraham watched as he observed everyone eating away at the feast before them, but how they ate astonished him. Solomon watched quietly as everyone ate, since he himself was unable to. Michelle had thrown a raw slab of steak down in front of her and was now cutting into it with her teeth. She growled softly as she tore away at the meat and ripped it apart in her teeth. But Abraham couldn't help but notice, looked a little sharper than his own canines, but not quite as long and sharp as Asher's. There was something feral about her. Perhaps it was her werewolf blood. Tamil wasn't eating a whole lot himself, but he would occasionally reach across the table and grab a piece of fruit to chew on. Calypso's eyes seemed to brighten over the sushi dishes as she took her time selecting which ones to try first. When she got a hold of one, she ate it so fast it was almost like she'd never put it on her plate. Abraham had never stopped to consider that mermaids probably had a real liking for seafood. Meanwhile, Asher had nothing on his plate. However, there was a bottle of some sort in front of him. Every now and then he would lift the bottle to his lips and take a swig of its contents. At first, Abraham couldn't tell what it was, until a small trickle of red liquid dripped from the side of Asher's cheek. It must be blood. Asher was drinking from a bottle of blood, which made Abraham both mystified and horrified at the same time. However, it was Sarah that caused Abraham to squirm in his chair. Abraham finally discovered that the paralyzed raccoon was for Sarah. Sarah lifted it up to her perch above the table, and she held the animal close to her face. She opened her mouth, revealing her own long and terrifying fangs as she plunged them into the animal's body. The animal didn't move, but Abraham could tell that it was a most unpleasant feeling. Suddenly, Abraham noticed that Sarah looked almost like she was chewing on it and slurping. And then he pieced it all together. Abraham had read somewhere that spiders inject venom into their food so the insides turn to mush and then drink out the fluids. And that must be exactly what Abraham was watching. Abraham forced himself to look away. "Is everything all right?" Solomon asked. "Just not very hungry right now," Abraham muttered. There was a small echo of laughter around the table, as they could all tell that Abraham was not accustomed to their eating habits. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it," Solomon assured him. They continued to eat for another hour, swapping stories and laughing with each other. Abraham soon began to enjoy their company. It was like he was with a real family. He forgot that they weren't human, and he forgot that their eating habits were less than civilized. He couldn't help but enjoy everything that he was seeing and hearing. It was a wonderful experience. After a while, the talking and laughing died down, though, and Solomon cleared his throat for everyone to pay attention. "All right. It's getting late, for most of us anyway. And we have a very big day tomorrow. It's one we've known has been coming for a while, and we have to be ready for it. So, you all know what to do," Solomon said. Abraham looked around the table and saw mixed expressions, but none were positive. Everyone looked anxious or nervous about something, especially Michelle. "Asher, I know you want to get back on the trail, but I need you here for tonight and tomorrow, if you don't mind." "I'm going to need you," Solomon said. Asher nodded his response. "Right. I understand," he said darkly. Michelle nodded in his direction as if offering a silent thank you. "Calypso, I want you on standby when things settle down. I have a feeling that your abilities will be necessary. And Sarah, I need you to start blocking off the yard tomorrow morning with your webs, dear. I don't want this getting out of the yard." Both Sarah and Calypso nodded quietly, and Michelle smiled sadly at them, again with that unsaid thank you expression. Abraham, however, was very confused. "Hold on, what's happening tomorrow?" Abraham spoke up. The whole house turned to look at him in surprise. Michelle looked down at the floor, unable to look at anyone. Abraham had never seen her look so anxious. "Tomorrow's the full moon, Abraham," Michelle whispered. "Tomorrow I transform." Abraham stared at her in shock. How could he have forgotten? Of course she would transform on the full moon. That's kind of what goes along with being a werewolf. "Every full moon, the house prepares so that we can keep her from getting loose and losing control," Solomon explained. "Sarah uses her webs to create a fence around the yard for Michelle to stay in, and Asher keeps her occupied." "What do you mean occupied?" Abraham asked. Asher took another swig from his bottle but didn't answer. "He's the only one who can keep me under control when I'm like that," Michelle muttered. "It's not a problem," Asher muttered, trying to reassure Michelle, who was looking more and more depressed by the second. "How exactly do you keep a werewolf under control?" Abraham asked hesitantly. "You don't," Michelle said. "Asher fights me every full moon to keep my attention on him and away from the rest of the Monster Club." "Michelle, you've been too hard on yourself," Calypso chimed in. "We know you can't help it. It's not your fault." "It might as well be." Michelle stood up and walked away from the table. "Thanks for the meal. I'm going to bed." Abraham turned and watched her go. Solomon sighed and nodded for the rest of the table to leave as well. The rest of the table rose to their feet and began cleaning up. Abraham didn't move, but only watched everyone work, and then he looked to Solomon. "What can I do?" Abraham asked. "Abraham," Solomon said, "I appreciate how willing to help us you are, and it warms our hearts to know that you are so outgoing and caring. However, this is a much more serious matter than simply investigating a disappearance. This is a life or death matter. I must ask that tomorrow night you stay in your room and not come out until we have called you." "Sorry, I only wanted—" "I know what you wanted, and again, we appreciate it. But there's nothing you can do," Solomon said more firmly. Abraham nodded in defeat, knowing that there was no point arguing about it. He stood up and went to go help the others put away dishes and clean. The rest of the house was quiet as they worked. An hour passed before Abraham finally went up to bed. Sarah and Tamil had gone off to bed not long ago. Asher was downstairs reading a book, and Calypso was taking a bath somewhere upstairs. He could still hear the water running, and he was beginning to wonder if she was planning to flooding the whole room. As he walked up to bed, he walked by Michelle's room. The room was locked, and he didn't bother stopping to knock. However, just as he was turning the corner, he could have sworn he heard the faintest sound of a sob come from behind the door. His heart fell as he realized just how upset and nervous Michelle was, and that she must feel this way every time the full moon comes around. I wish I could do something, Abraham muttered darkly. He climbed into bed and lay down, the thoughts of tomorrow night filling his mind and dreams. And that was Chapter 6. Now, we can read Chapter 7 and see the whole werewolf transformation bit, or we can move on to Raptors or something else. I'll let you guys decide, and you guys let me know what you think. Got a request for one more? One more, okay. Down for Chapter 7, cool. Okay, alright. Looks like people want Chapter 7 so far. Alright, we got a lot of requests. Alright, here we go. Let's go into it. It looks like everyone wants it. Sweet. Alright. Moving on to Chapter 7, which I wrote January 29th, 2013. Here we go. When the night of the full moon came, the entire house was on edge. Abraham could feel the tension. Even Sarah, who was always so chipper and happy, seemed slightly out of focus and a little lost in her own thoughts. She spent most of her time in the yard weaving her webs around the borders of the yard over and over again. Solomon stayed cooped up in the kitchen, staying out of the window. Camille sat quietly in the living room, not talking. His humor was dry and his spirit wasn't into it. Calypso was even more clumsy than normal. Her gaze was somewhere off into space and she was easily distracted. However, of everyone in the house, it was Asher and Michelle who were acting the most odd. Asher would spend the day cleaning a pistol while occasionally slipping off into a short nap, which he would quickly wake up from and curse himself for falling asleep. When someone tried to speak to him, he was slow to respond, if he responded at all. Michelle stayed cooped up in her room. Unlike the other night, Abraham didn't hear her sobbing or crying, but he could feel a great deal of stress and emotions coming from the other side of that door. "Abraham?" Solomon muttered, and Abraham jerked up from his thoughts and looked up at Solomon, who was standing over him. Sorry, Solomon, I was just thinking. I understand that. I really do. But it's time." Abraham turned to look outside. The sun was setting. Abraham felt his heart speed up. "When will she change?" Abraham asked. "I'd say in another half an hour," Solomon said. "I wanted to remind you, stay inside and not go near Michelle or Asher tonight." Abraham nodded. Suddenly he detected movement in from the back door porch, walking a very distressed and sad Sarah. "Sarah, is it done?" "Yes," she whispered. "The web is up and it'll keep her from escaping the yard." "Thank you, Sarah," Solomon said. Abraham was about to open his mouth when he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Everyone turned to look at this as they saw a very depressing sight. From down the stairs walked Michelle. She was wearing nothing but a torn-up old shirt and shorts. She was barefoot and she looked very scared. Wrapped around her neck was a large and heavy collar. Behind her was Asher, who was clad in his coat and red shirt. Strapped to his side was a pistol and a knife, causing a chill to run down Abraham's spine. He watched the two of them walk out the door before speaking. "Why does he have a gun and a knife? He's not going to hurt her, is he?" Abraham asked. "A werewolf can only be killed by silver, but they can be hurt by normal weapons. He uses those weapons to keep her under control and to keep her attention on him. But this happens every month. She'll be fine." "She doesn't look fine to me," Abraham muttered. "Would you be fine if you knew that in a matter of minutes you were going to go through an unimaginable change?" Solomon growled. Abraham fell silent and walked to the window. He watched as Michelle stood in the center of the yard. She turned and gazed up at the setting sun and watched as the glow of the moon began to grow brighter and brighter. He could see a tear roll down her cheek. Asher walked around her and pulled something out of the ground from beneath the long grass. It was a large, heavy chain which he latched around Michelle's large metal collar. He had tethered her to the ground. "Why does she need the chain?" Abraham asked. "Werewolves act on a destructive impulse. They must destroy and devour everything in their path.
Asher will be her primary target, but to ensure that she doesn't come after anyone in the house, we chain her to the yard so that she can't get in, Solomon explained. As he said this, the sun finally set. Sarah covered her face and quickly scurried to her room. Abraham, I suggest going to your room now. This isn't something you want to see. Abraham agreed and walked into his room as the light of the full moon shone through the window. He looked outside to see it in all its beauty. But from his window, he could look and see Michelle. She was looking up at Asher with the most terrified and sad eyes he had ever seen on any living creature. Asher walked forward and removed the shirt from her body and tossed it aside, and then he stepped back. The light fell on Michelle, and it happened. Michelle screamed and suddenly arched her back as if electrocuted. She screamed in agony, and there was a tremendous popping and sucking sound as her body was realigned and readjusted. Asher just watched her, unfazed by what was happening. He didn't try to go near her or offer her any aid, but rather just watched her with a sad and helpless expression. There was nothing he could do for her. Michelle's body began to grow larger, and her hair began to grow out. There were more ripping and snarling sounds coming from her as her body continued its grotesque transformation. Unable to watch anymore, Abraham pulled himself away from the window and closed his eyes tight, but that didn't stop the sounds coming from outside. Michelle screamed as if in dire pain. The sounds of cracking and tearing of skin and bone could be heard as her body continued to alter itself into that of a monster. There was the sound of a loud rip as her shorts were torn to pieces, and the sound of a loud cracking and disgusting sound of bones and muscles aligning. The screams that Michelle was making began to sound less and less human as they changed from cries into howls and growls. Finally, after almost 5 minutes, the sound seemed to die down. Abraham dared himself to look out the window, and what he saw both mystified and horrified him. Michelle was gone. Under the light of the full moon stood a creature that Abraham could only describe as a giant wolf. It stood on its hands and legs, and its snout was long and lean. Its ears were perked up as if listening to the sounds of the night, its teeth glistening with saliva, and its claws were sharp like daggers. It was twice as large as Michelle had been, and it was covered with fur and hair. From its rump was a long tail that swished back and forth. Asher simply stared at the creature. While there was still sadness in his eyes, there was also a hint of anger there too. The werewolf suddenly stood on its hind legs and stared up at the gorgeous full moon. It reared back its large head and let out a long and powerful howl. Abraham felt chills run through him at the cry. Abraham, are you watching this? Abraham turned to see Tamil and Calypso at the door. They were both staring at him. Sorry, I've never seen a werewolf before. I've never seen myself. Can't, Tamil tried to joke, but heard many times. Never get easier. Abraham believed him. He couldn't imagine having to go through that horrifying change every full moon. So what happens now? Abraham asked. Michelle's mind will lose itself to the beast, and then... Calypso choked on the last words. Watch if you must, Tamil growled, looking away. Abraham heard a growling sound and looked outside to see Michelle on her haunches snarling furiously at Asher. She doesn't recognize him? Abraham cried. Calypso shook her head and hugged herself as her body trembled. A werewolf doesn't recognize friends. It only sees two things, enemies and food. Abraham looked back out to see that Asher hadn't budged an inch. Michelle snarled and began pulling against her chains, but the powerful bonds held her back, keeping her away from Asher. Asher sighed and walked a little closer. Michelle, are you still in there? He asked. The wolf barked and yanked back against its chain. I'm here to help you. Take everything out on me. What's he talking about? Abraham asked. Werewolf filled with destructive anger, Tamil said darkly. Asher let Michelle attack him. Let out anger. Abraham nodded and turned to watch what happened next. Michelle let out a howl of anger and leapt forward, her jaws outstretched and her claws flailing. As she did, the chain began to strain and creak under the stress. Asher lunged at her and fired off a hard kick into her chest, sending her sprawling backwards. Michelle jumped back to her feet and roared again. Suddenly Michelle stopped and began sniffing the air. Her nose pointed towards the window that Abraham was looking out of. Asher's face went pale as he watched this. No. You smell him, don't you? Asher whispered in terror. Michelle suddenly got a light in her eyes and she licked her chops. You smell Abraham! Abraham tried to watch what happened next, but it happened so fast that he couldn't quite believe it. In a matter of seconds, Michelle whirled around and bit the chain, holding her with her jaws, snapping the iron in half. She was free. Asher went on the attack and charged her. He fired off punches into her stomach, causing Michelle to fall back and howl, but Michelle was hardly fazed. She rushed Asher with her claws extended. "Asher!" Abraham cried. It was too late. Michelle leapt on him and tore him to pieces. Her claws tore away at his flesh and clothes as her fangs bit deep into his body, slashing and cutting away, sending blood and guts all over the floor. Abraham stumbled away from the window in horror as Michelle let out a blood-curdling howl to the moon, her bloody teeth flashing red. "He's dead!" Abraham cried. Michelle turned away from the beaten and bloody vampire and began to sniff around the yard, searching for a new scent. Abraham's scent. "She killed him!" "No," Calypso said. There was a hint of awe in her voice. "It takes more than that to kill Asher. Look!" Abraham turned his head to look, and to his surprise, the blood and guts that had been ripped from Asher's body were flowing back into it, as if they had a mind of their own. Shadows and bats began to reform his broken flesh and bone. Within moments, he was back on his feet again, as if he'd never been harmed. The werewolf spun to see Asher back on his feet, and she looked genuinely shocked. Asher's face was obscured by shadows, but from that shadowy face, Abraham could see his eyes glowing a bloody red, and his fangs parted in a vicious and malicious grin. "Not a bad try. Sorry about this," he snarled. Suddenly from inside his coat, he pulled that pistol he'd had before and fired off 2 shots at Michelle's arm and stomach. Michelle let out a howl of pain and bent over in agony as the bullets tore through her stomach and ripped her arm. However, she had no time to recover. Asher was disappearing in a shadow, and from that shadow sprang a large black wolf, its eyes glowing red, just like Asher's. "What the? Asher just..." "Asher is a true vampire." Solomon had walked in behind them and was watching from the battle. "Many forms of media today try to water down the vampire into a virus or some sort of superhuman genetic defect. The truth is that Bram Stoker's Dracula was closer to the truth than any of the others ever were. Vampires have incredible powers of regeneration, shape-shifting, hypnosis, and even combat." Abraham never took his eyes off the fight he was watching. The black wolf that was Asher roared and attacked the werewolf. Michelle was far bigger than he was, but she couldn't stop Asher's jaws from closing around her throat and ripping away with intense malice. However, she used her powerful claws to fling Asher off of her and slam his body into a tree. With a loud yelp, Asher returned to his vampiric form and sank to the ground, clutching his head dizzily. Michelle, meanwhile, turned her eyes towards the house and howled furiously. Solomon suddenly realized what she was doing. "Everyone get back!" Abraham felt Tamil and Calypso yank him away from the window, just in time for the giant wolf to burst through it. Glass and wood flew, and Abraham found himself sprawled on the floor. He looked up to see the cold blue eyes of the werewolf leering down at him hungrily. Michelle's teeth were clamped in a furious snarl as a growl rumbled in her throat. Michelle, please calm down," Calypso cried. She ran between the werewolf and Abraham, blocking its path. Next to her, Tamil came darting forward, but prepared to protect him. Michelle stared down at them for a moment, as if processing this new development. Then she growled and prepared to pounce. Abraham trembled in fear. His time was up. He was going to die. Suddenly, there was an explosion of shrieks and howling. Abraham looked up to see a tornado of bats flying into the broken window, flying like a typhoon of shrieking cries and flapping wings. Michelle barked and roared, swiping at the bats with her claws, but she couldn't rid herself of the vermin. "Asher!" Solomon shouted to the twisting bats. "Get her out of here! Pacify her!" The bats suddenly began to join in formation and fly into one solid mass, until the mass of bats took on a very familiar form. Asher stood before them, but his body was different. Instead of flesh and blood, his body seemed to be made of some twisting and moving shadow. His eyes glowing red with fury, and his body, though human in shape, was nothing but a mass of darkness. What in the hell had he become? Michelle made a move to attack, but the shadow Asher moved first, slamming itself with all of its might into Michelle, tackling her and sending them both flying out the room and back into the yard. The shadow engulfed Michelle and slammed her into the grass. With one hand on her throat and another on the pistol, the shadow Asher raised the gun and pointed at Michelle's chest and pulled the trigger. Bang! Michelle let out a howl of pain and then sank to the ground, eyes closed. Abraham pulled himself to his feet with Tamil's help, but he still couldn't quite find his balance. He couldn't believe what had just happened, what all he had just seen. He stumbled to the broken window and looked out to see the shadow form of Asher standing over the unconscious werewolf. He had his gun drawn, and it looked like he was moving it to aim at her head. "Asher!" Solomon tried to cry, but he didn't seem to be listening. Abraham then turned to see another figure making its way into the yard. She was screaming his name too. "Asher! Asher!" It was Calypso. Asher, please stop. It's okay.
She kept running towards him, but suddenly her feet caught beneath her and she stumbled to the ground clumsily. Asher's glowing red eyes turned to look at her, and Abraham saw that his eyes seemed to be dimming. The shadows were lifting. Calypso picked herself up and practically crawled to Asher, who was slowly returning to his normal appearance. The shadows dissipated and began to vanish from view. His eyes were no longer glowing, and his body looked tired and beaten. But still, unharmed overall. He leaned down and helped Calypso up, who wrapped her arms around his waist. "It's okay," Asher whispered. "I'm all right." Calypso held on tight, as if letting go would bring back the shadow monster. Abraham watched the two for a moment, and then looked down at the werewolf. "Is she dead?" Abraham asked. "No," Solomon said. "Asher didn't shoot her with silver. She will feel like she was hit by a train, I'm sure, but she will be all right." Jamil walked Abraham to the bed and sat down. He tried to ignore the mess and broken glass all over the floor. What the hell was that?" Abraham asked. "Was that really Asher just now?" Solomon nodded. "I haven't seen him like that in a long time. Not since the day that Katie went missing." "What was that?" "It was a blood hunger," Solomon said. "When a human body goes under a great deal of stress or fear, their adrenaline increases and they temporarily become stronger and faster. It's a survival reflex. Vampires experience something similar. Their blood pumps faster, their power increases twofold. We call it blood hunger, and while in that state, Asher takes on the form of a living shadow. That is why he's tasked with protecting this family. He's the strongest one here." Abraham nodded his understanding, still trying to process all that had just happened. "Why did he feel so much stress and fear? Michelle couldn't hurt him." "Yes, but she could hurt you, or Tamil, or Calypso. My guess is that his fear of any of one of you being hurt sent him into that state, and he used it to stop her." "You okay?" Tamil asked finally. The sun was finally starting to come up after the hours of waiting, and Abraham looked out to see what had happened. Calypso had let go of Asher, and Asher was holding Michelle's unconscious body, which would return to human form. Her body looked beaten, tired, and bloody. Her shirt had been ripped away and her shorts were torn to ribbons, but she was breathing, and she would recover. Asher had tears in his eyes as he walked her back into the house. Sarah was outside, taking down the webbing gate that she had built. She wasn't looking at Michelle or Asher. She was trying to keep her focus on her work. "What happens now?" Abraham asked. "We go about our business," Solomon said. "We clean up this mess and we prepare for the day. But I must ask that you not bother Michelle or Asher about what happened tonight. Perhaps we could all use some sleep before we do something else." Abraham and Tamil nodded their agreement, and Abraham lay back on his bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. His dreams were dark, with moving shadows and a wolf howling a sad and lowly tune to the full moon. And that was Chapter 7. You now know what happened. Hooray! Let me know what you guys think, and I'll pull up Raptor Girls. Yes, this is one of my earlier stories. This isn't the first story I ever wrote, but you can definitely tell it's different from what I write now. I look back on this and I know I could have edited this a lot better. All right. Well, to wrap up the evening, we will read one or two chapters of Raptor Girls. So, we will get started. We left off on Chapter 4, so that's what we're going to read. Everyday Life with Raptors, Part 4, written May 19th, 2018. Can't believe it, right? All right. Here we go. The looks from the guests could be ignored. That wasn't an issue. Owen simply asked that they be put in a room slightly away from all the other guests. This steakhouse was one that Owen had enjoyed since his college years, and they knew how to accommodate his needs. The sounds of the girls eating was a bit different. There were only so many ways he could beg Charlie and Delta to keep it down and not make sounds while eating. Blue occasionally had to snap at them, and Echo just kept her eyes on her plate, not wanting to cause trouble or bring attention to herself. The waitress and waiter that were seeing their table were actually nervous to get too close, usually only gravitating towards Owen's side of the circle booth that they shared. Blue had her steak, Delta had her pork chops, Echo was chowing on a burger, and Charlie had a plate of kids' chicken tenders, though Owen suspected she'd want more than 4 she'd gotten. She had hardly touched the french fries. He just chuckled and returned to his own steak. Was it inappropriate to say that eating steak just lost some of its luster when watching the way these girls could put away food?
Alpha? Blue spoke up. Do you mind if I ask you something?
Blue, please, just call me Owen, all right? Owen laughed. We're not in the field.
Sorry, sir. Blue blushed. I wanted to ask you, how did you find our performance in the mall tonight?
This question caused the other girls, except for Charlie, to look up at Owen. Well, all around, it was a successful operation. All performed well, and we got the criminals under control, Owen answered.
But isn't there anywhere for us to improve? Blue asked. Damn it, Blue, if he says we did fine, take the compliment. Delta rolled her eyes. Well, I was just thinking maybe we should have tried to rally the target through a kill zone, and it's not worth worrying about now. Echo spoke up. I mean, it's over, right?
Yeah, Echo's right, Owen added. Don't try to overanalyze yourselves. For your first field operation, I couldn't be more proud of you. Blue and Echo smiled at this, though Delta just huffed and tore into her pork on her plate again. And Charlie, for the love of God, slow down, you'll choke. Charlie looked up from her plate, 3 chicken tenders shoved in her mouth at once. Echo sighed and plucked 2 out as Delta snickered. There were times Owen worried about Charlie. Childishness.
Excuse me? Is everything okay over here?
Owen glanced up at the table to see the waitress enter, looking nervous once more. We're fine, thank you. We'll take the bill when you're ready.
Actually, someone's already paid your bill, the waitress giggled. That's why I came to see you. You have a visitor who insists he knows you.
From behind her walked a tall, heavy-set man with a goatee and short-cut hair. He adjusted his belt buckle and coughed into his fist to get Owen's attention. The minute the girls saw him, their eyes snapped in his direction, and their expressions were unmistakably hostile. Delta nearly jumped out of her seat to punch him. Charlie growled and began wolfing down fries to calm herself. A flash of anger shone in Echo's eyes, and Blue herself clenched her fists tightly in rage. Owen was actually impressed by their restraint. "Hoskins," Owen muttered. "I guess I should thank you for paying for the meal." "Think nothing of it. Thought I could take the opportunity to chat with you about what happened tonight?" he asked. "Go ahead," Owen replied. "More in private, if you don't mind. Join me outside for a smoke?"
Whatever you have to say to the Alpha, you can say to us, Blue snapped. Yeah, Charlie agreed. Don't keep secrets, Hogskin. That's Hoskins, Charlie, but I agree, Echo snarled. Stand down, Blue hissed. All of you.
Blue, take charge. Make sure the girls clean up and meet me by the truck when you're done, Owen said.
Yes, sir, Blue nodded.
Owen climbed to his feet and walked to Hoskins to step out into the back of the restaurant. Thanks for seeing reason. I haven't seen any reason from you yet, Hoskins. I'm hoping you'll surprise me. While the front of the steakhouse was inviting and enticing, the back of the steakhouse was a junk pile. 2 large dumpsters by the gated-off parking lot and several black bags of trash. Flies flew around in the back over old and spoiled meat. The swell was too much for the girls to handle, so it was a good thing that they weren't there. Hoskins leaned against the railing of the walkway down from the back door to the dumpsters. Owen leaned by the door himself and watched him carefully. Fantastic work today, Grady. Hoskins smiled, smoke streaming from his nostrils as he fiddled with the cigarette in his fingers. Your girls show real promise. That they do, Owen agreed. So what do you want? Lots of things, Grady. But for now, I'd like your help with something, he laughed. And what's that? I've got a special project coming up. Something that I think your girls are suited for. Pass, Owen snapped. Don't be like that, Grady. You haven't even heard what I have to say, Hoskins argued, frustrated by Owen's attitude. I know what you have to say, Hoskins, and I've told you before what I think of your little pet projects, Owen snarled. You look at those 4 girls and see trained attack animals. They're thinking, feeling, and growing girls. We taught them combat tactics and drills to help teach them social cues and discipline, and for dealing with emergency situations, Hoskins pointed out. You did that just today, and they did it perfectly, against armed enemies. We were lucky today. The girls have the advantage of attacking at night and being in a confined location like a mall. They are not super soldiers, Owen argued. I know that, Hoskins shrugged. Owen paused and blinked, surprised by his attitude. What? That they aren't super soldiers. But you can't pretend they're not normal girls either. These girls want action, and we should give it to them, Hoskins added. Come on, Grady, you were in the Navy. You know what it's like in combat. Men and women in armed forces, in and out, own police force. They all die every day from criminals and terrorists and enemy combatants with new and improved technology. And I just saw 4 Raptor girls show that they could overpower a larger force that was armed. These girls, this form of combat, it's the future. If the only future for those girls is to be mindless killers in your screwed up agenda, then you can go ahead and shoot me because I really don't want to be around to see it. Owen leaned back and turned to go back inside. Grady, you can't stop progress, Hoskins argued. Turning those girls into killers isn't progress, Hoskins. It's evil, Owen snapped. Thanks for the meal. Let us know when you've got another extra species emergency for us to deal with. Owen didn't let him respond. He simply walked through the door and back into the steakhouse. Hoskins stood there and shook his head in disappointment. Sorry to say, Grady. Those girls aren't going to be a part of this those girls will be a part of this project. With or without you. He pulled out his phone, pressed a speed dial number, and held it up to his ear. He waited and then spoke when answered. This is Hoskins. Moving forward with the project. Owen hurried outside, overcome with the urge to take a shower after having to deal with Hoskins for so long. The man was hateful and ambitious. He knew that Hoskins wouldn't let up, and that would become an issue later on down the road. He walked to the parking lot and saw that the girls had already piled into the back of the truck. All except Echo, who was standing just a few yards away, brushing her hair back. When she saw Owen coming, she ran to him quickly. Is everything all right? She nodded quickly, but then frowned.
What Hoskins said, he didn't want anything from us, did he?
He did, but I won't give it to him, Owen answered. Don't worry about Hoskins, all right? That goes for you and your sisters.
I don't like him.
I got that impression, Owen teased.
No, I mean, he's a cruel person, and I don't think he cares about how we feel about anything.
Owen paused. Echo, what's going on?
It's nothing.
You're not usually the one waiting for me outside the truck. You have something on your mind, so tell me what's wrong. Do I need to make that an order?
No, sir. I'm sorry, sir, but if the others knew about it, they'd laugh.
Owen groaned and scratched the back of his head. This was the one thing he dreaded most about dealing with 4 Raptor girls. Drama. However, as caretaker, he had to bear this burden. Blue! He shouted. She poked her head out of the truck just in time for Owen to toss her the keys. Get the engine started and play the radio or something. Echo and I need a minute. 10-4, she called back, returning to do as ordered. Owen took Echo's arm and led her further away from the truck. All right, no one can hear. Let's talk. What's wrong?
I only helped out near the end of the mission today. I only took down 1 target.
This isn't a competition.
But it's not because I was too slow. It was because I was nervous,
Echo confessed.
I'm not sure if I'm cut out to be an operator.
What are you talking about, Echo? You perform fine in simulations and drills, and rumor has it you were contender for beta of the pack, Owen argued. I'd say you're perfectly qualified.
That was a long time ago, and performing in drills is easy. But out there, the idea that I could lose, the thought of messing up and putting my sisters in danger?
You wouldn't let that happen, Owen pointed out.
You don't know that. You don't know about...
Yes, Owen pressed. Echo hugged herself a moment and looked away, pulling down her bangs to hide her scar.
I haven't been that confident in years. Not since.
Look, Echo, you may not realize it about yourself yet, but you do have what it takes to be part of this pack. You are a sharp, intelligent, and beautiful girl. You have talent, and I saw it. But I hesitated. You were patient, Owen corrected her. You were smart and knew not to move needlessly. Delta is just naturally more aggressive and when in guns blazing, so to speak. And that's good in its place, but she could stand to learn a thing or two from you. And Blue in terms of patience.
Owen, are you sure about me? She whispered. I don't want to drag my sisters down.
Echo, if I thought you were a threat to the team or a hindrance, I wouldn't even be having this conversation. I'd have already decommissioned you and told you to stay home next time. I care about all 4 of you, and I won't let anyone endanger you. Not me, not your sisters, and definitely not Hoskins. Echo smiled softly when Owen insulted Hoskins. He reached over and very, very lightly touched her head. Unlike Blue and Charlie, who didn't mind physical contact, Echo was very fragile. She would often shrink back from the slightest touch, but Owen knew just where to approach. He rubbed her head, and Echo, though tense now, seemed more pleased. Thank you, Alpha. It's Owen, okay? Let's get you girls back home. Tomorrow is hide-and-seek day. Owen winked. At this, Echo gasped a little, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Really? I'll bet that'll cheer you up. It might even get Delta to simmer down, Owen muttered. As they walked back to the truck, Echo had a slight spring in her step, but her hair still covered that scar. Owen made a mental note. He would need to ask Blue about Echo's scar. It might go ways to finding out what broke Echo's spirit. Despite taking care of them, he knew so little about them. Could he really be so critical of Hoskins for not knowing about these girls when he himself didn't know that much about them either? A question he'd save for another day, of course, as he climbed in the truck to take his dysfunctional squad back home. All right, buckle up, you four. Rolling out. Yes, sir. All right, and that was part 4. We have enough time for part 5 if y'all want. Can you make a mammoth boy? No, because these stories are mostly pre-written. All right. Got a request for more. That was really goofy. I'm sorry about that. Can't help but think Hoskins may be a problem later. Oh, y'all don't remember who Hoskins is? Did any of you guys see Jurassic World? Yeah, Hoskins was in Jurassic World. He was one of the characters. I based most of the characters off of characters from Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, and Hoskins was the guy played by Vincent. I think he was played by Vincent D'Onofrio. He was like the bad guy or something in the first Jurassic World. Raptor waifus were not what I expected coming from you for Honor content mainly. I mean, For Honor is what I play like for gaming and stuff, but I'm a writer. I've been writing stories well before I made For Honor content, so this is something that I enjoy doing, just writing stories. All right, so let's get to it. Part 5. I wrote this June 23rd, 2018. Blue squatted low and sniffed the air. It was thick with humidity. The sky was clear and the night was welcoming. Bugs flitted around in the forests of the Appalachian Mountains. This was their hunting ground. This was their training field. Her eyes peered through the thick foliage, searching for their target. All units, check in. What's your status? This is Delta. I've got nothing here, Blue. Echo here. Sorry, Blue. No target. Hi, Charlie here. I'm drawing a blank too. Sorry. Regroup, Blue instructed, speaking clearly into her microphone and lowering her stance a bit. She waited only 3 minutes before the 3 girls ran to her side from their positions. Blue sighed in disbelief and rubbed the back of her head. All of them were decked out in their camo body armor and their combat tools. Damn it, girls. We have exactly 40 minutes before time runs out and we lose. Why'd that asshole have to hide the damn target so well this time? Delta snapped. Lock it up, Blue snarled. Don't talk about our alpha that way. Sorry, Delta groaned. It wouldn't be a game if it was easy, Charlie pointed out, tugging on her pigtails. Blue nodded her agreement. Hide and seek is more than a game, Charlie. It's a test. Hide and seek was a game that Owen played with the girls every month or so. The Navy would rent a small portion of land or preserve available to the public, and for 24 hours set an animal loose in the area. Before the game begins, Owen would give Blue a sample of the animal's hair or tissue for them to smell and study. Then, using their training, their predator senses, and their instincts, they would have until midnight to hunt the animal and kill it. Usually, they excelled at this game. Today, a wild boar had been released, but for some reason, the girls had lost its trail in the hills of the area. Now they were lost and getting nowhere. Blue, do you still have that piece of flesh? Delta asked. Let's get one more whiff. Blue nodded and reached into her survival pack and pulled out the small, bloody clump of meat. Delta and Charlie both leaned in and sniffed it, taking in the scent. Blue and Echo did the same, and then Blue quickly put it away again so it wouldn't distract them from their search. They sniffed the air and the trees, sensing.
hoping to pick up something. Anything.
Damn. I'd have to be a pig. I'm getting hungry now, Delta grumbled. Stop thinking with your stomach, Delta, Blue growled. You can't think with your stomach, silly. Your brain is in your head, Blue, Charlie pointed out, proud of her own intelligence. I know that, Charlie, Blue laughed. It's a figure of speech. I knew that, Charlie scoffed, trying to hide her blush. That reminds me, Echo, what was it that Alpha wanted to talk to you about the other day after Hoskins left? Delta asked. You looked pretty upset, but then were smiling when you were done. It was nothing, Echo whispered. Alpha was just giving me advice. What kind of advice? Blue asked. Alpha gives great advice, Charlie added, giggling. I remember when he told me I could eat better if I cut up my food first. I don't think he was giving you advice, Charlie. I think he just didn't want to be sick watching you try to scarf down everything whole, Delta cackled. You're no better, Charlie countered defensively. He's had to correct you on your eating, too. Yeah, but the difference is I don't care what he says, Delta shrugged. He can command me in the field, not at the dinner table. You're so cool, Delta, Charlie sighed. Or maybe she's just stubborn, Blue hissed. Why don't you lock it up, Blue? Delta teased. Hey, Echo whispered, silencing them. Do you smell that? The girls all stopped bickering and began to sniff the air again. Unlike before, something familiar waved past their noses. A strange sensation of recognition. Mouths watered and eyes snapped open at the realization. Pig! Delta gasped. I smell it too! Charlie squealed. All right, girls, seek and destroy. Delta, take right. Echo behind, Charlie to my left. We've only got a few minutes to eliminate the target, Blue ordered. The girls didn't hesitate. Despite their earlier bickering, when it was time for action, they worked like a well-oiled machine. The four sprinted through the dense forest and through the mountains, following the smell. Their legs, powerful like the predatory beasts they emulated, were capable of carrying them through any terrain at breakneck speed. Currently, Blue was the fastest of the four, but all were able to reach speeds of nearly 50 miles per hour. To increase speed, the girls would lean their upper torso forward to angle their bodies, and at times would let their arms pump closer to their sides, or merely let them hang back so they didn't interfere with them. With each time of their essence. With time being of the essence, the girls were running low and hard, their feet kicking up leaves and debris with tremendous force. 65 million years ago, the raptor was one of the apex predators of the ancient world. Instincts like wild dogs and senses to match. Speed to rival a cheetah, and a ferocious, powerful killing urge. It was in these instincts and natural urges that surged them forward. Their eyes flashed with hungry intensity, and their claws dug through soil with harsh resolve. They were hunters. They were killers. They were raptors. Target is 1,000 meters in closing, Delta hissed. Charlie, speed up. You're getting too close, Blue instructed. Right. Charlie pulled off a little, giving Echo room to move up. With their high-speed running, Echo's hair was flying free, showing her scar, but also a cunning sneer. Blue smiled to herself. It had been a long time since she'd seen Echo make that face. It was good to have her back, even if only for a while. Through the trees! Charlie shouted. The four girls looked up ahead, and sure enough, there was a faint light behind the trees, and the smell was resonating from there. Engage! Blue barked. The three girls let out a loud animal cry like a real pack of raptors, and all turned sharply, lunging through the trees as a loud, terrified squeal filled the air. The girls froze in shock at the large bonfire they nearly crashed into. The pig they were hunting was held over it on a spit. Surrounding the fire were 12 young boys, all wearing Cub Scout uniforms and hats, with neckerchiefs on their sweaty necks. They stared up at the girls, open-mouthed and in terror, as their counselors threw themselves in between the girls and the boys, trying to shield them with their bodies. The boys were screaming in fear, and several jumped up and began running away, as Blue, blushing deeply, relaxed her stance, looking to her sisters, who were all blushing rather heavily too. Echo was hiding her scar with her hair, and Charlie was waving sheepishly as Delta tried to pull her hood over her head and not admit that they just busted in on a campsite. Sorry? Blue grumbled. Are you serious? Owen grumbled over the phone as he listened to Blue's entire report on the events. Alpha, I am so sorry. It's not your fault, Blue, it's mine. I got the dates mixed up. It's on me, Owen sighed. I forgot that we'd rented the campgrounds for next weekend, not this one. Still, we should have recognized the smell of those children. We were so caught up in the hunt that we... Enough. There's no point making excuses, okay? How are the others? Well, Echo hasn't said a word since the incident. I think she's mortified she let others see her scar. Delta's sulking in the woods. I think her pride's a bit hurt, but she'll get over it. And Charlie, well, she's becoming fast friends with the kids. Really? Affirmative. I've told her to stop bothering them, but the kids constantly want her to play with them. I don't know how to make them stop. Orders? Well, let her have her fun for now. It's not every day children get to play with a raptor. As long as no one gets hurt, I think it's fine. Owen answered with an embarrassed chuckle. I'll be there to pick you up tonight.
What about Echo and Delta?
I didn't even know where to begin with those two. Make sure you four are at the entrance of the camp, and I'll be there at 530 hours.
Yes, sir, and again, I am truly sorry about this, Alpha. I mean, Owen.
Owen smiled, glad that she was finally starting to call him Owen instead of just Alpha. Mistakes happen, and this one's on me. Just hang tight. Owen hung up the phone and rose to get the car started. It would take about 3 hours to get there. He had a long way to go. As he threw on his boots, his phone vibrated again and he laughed. Blue must have wanted something else. Pulling the phone out of his pocket, he placed it next to his ear and leaned in to rest on his shoulder while he tied his boot. Blue, just let it wait until I get there. Wrong person, Lieutenant. Owen's eyes widened and his hands stopped tying. He grabbed the phone ready to hang up and walk out the door. What the hell do you want with me, Hoskins? Happy to hear you too, friend, Hoskins chuckled. Look, believe it or not, I'm not calling about my project. You told me to let you know if there was another case that needed your girls. Well, we've got a situation. All right, what have you got? Owen asked, making his way out the door to get the girls. As he listened to Hoskins, he silently thought about only one thing. How much he genuinely didn't want anything to do with this man. This man didn't even brush his teeth without an agenda, so one could only wonder what strings were attached to this proposal.
All right, girls, Alpha will be here in 3 hours. Let's get our gear squared away and move to the front of the camp, Blue shouted.
Echo was sitting by the wall of the activity cabin near the large lake. She looked up, her face still red with embarrassment, but she didn't seem as traumatized as she was.
He's not upset, is he? Echo asked. No, though I expect we're going to hear about this little incident for a while, Blue grumbled. Where's Charlie?
Echo pointed past Blue to the other side of the activity building where Charlie was playing a game of handball with the boys who are now fully awake, despite it being only 2:30 a.m. The surprise of meeting a real raptor girl must have been like a huge dose of caffeine for these children. They squealed and laughed and hollered as Charlie ran around swatting a tennis ball back and forth with the boys. Blue shook her head.
Charlie, we should get going, Blue called. Just 10 more minutes. You did say that Alpha wouldn't get here for 3 hours. We can play a little longer. Don't you think the kids need sleep? Blue asked. But we're not tired, one boy called. Yeah, we want to play with Charlie, another agreed.
All the boys started jumping up and down excitedly, tugging on Charlie's hands to get her to keep playing. Blue sighed and placed her hands on her hips. Forget it. Just make sure you're ready to go in 3 hours. If not, you're running laps all day tomorrow.
Yay!
Charlie shouted, running off with the tireless children to continue their games. Their counselors were either watching through tired, blinking eyes or asleep on the wooden floor themselves. Blue looked back at Echo and smiled sadly. I sometimes wonder if she still respects my authority. She does, but she's also still a child herself. Fun is always going to trump orders for her, Echo explained. Right. Well, regardless, we need to get Delta. I'll be back. No, let me go get her, Blue, Echo offered. I think it'd probably be better if you, What? I think you need some rest, Echo finally whimpered shyly. Excuse me? Blue asked, surprised. Ever since we ran into that bonfire, you've been beating yourself up and worrying about if we'll get in trouble. And now that you know it's going to be okay, you should rest a while. Thanks, but I really don't need to sleep right now, Blue growled. No, but can't you just sit down for a bit? Relax? Echo asked fearfully. Blue couldn't help but look at her with disappointment. The fire in her eyes during the chase was all but gone. She was back to being scared of her own shadow. It made her pity Echo, and she hated to pity her sister like this. All right. Go get Delta if you want, but make sure you hurry back, all right? Blue finally conceded, not wanting to hear Echo whimper like this anymore. Affirmative. Echo ran out of the cabin towards the forest, leaving Blue to sit on the floor and watch the handball game that Charlie was clearly winning. As she watched, Blue's eyes did begin to get heavy from fatigue. It didn't take Echo long to find Delta. She was standing just 100 meters into the woods, next to a tall waterfall that led to the creek beyond the camp. Delta had her hands in her pockets and her hood pulled up, letting her hair out for once. Delta? Echo called. Blue says Alpha's on his way to pick us up. We should get back to camp. Is Alpha angry? Delta asked. No, but Blue says he's okay. Bet that makes her happy, Delta growled. Huh? Echo asked. What do you mean? Oh, come on, Echo. You can't tell me you don't see it. Blue sucks up to Alpha all the time. She eats out of the palm of his hand. He's our Alpha. He's in charge. He doesn't deserve to be, Delta snapped. Blue led us just fine before we met him. Now she does whatever he asks like a good lap dog. Didn't you feel it earlier, Echo? I saw it in your eyes too. Saw what? Your instincts, Delta answered, turning to face Echo, her face smiling and her eyes flashing excitedly. It was exhilarating. We felt free. Free, Echo. Like real beasts. No Alpha, no humans, no cities, no facilities, just us. The four of us. We were unstoppable. We were killers. Why do we need Alpha anyway? Stop it, Delta, Echo insisted. Alpha's our leader. Delta shook her head. I know he is, but I just... Echo, what is missing? She cried, slamming her fist against a tree painfully. I know we need Alpha. And I know he's a good leader, but I just want... I want to be free again. I don't want to feel like we did back then. Not back when we were... We won't, Echo answered. We're not there anymore, Delta. We're free of that horrible place. But not of the memories. And when Hoskins showed his ugly face at that steakhouse, I remembered those days when we were kids, when we were... Stop it. Stop it, Delta, please, Echo pleaded, hugging herself fearfully. Don't talk about them. Please? Delta blinked and ran to Echo, hugging her. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to remind you. It's okay. Delta, we're not there anymore. We left, and Alpha took us in. He won't ever let us go back. But can you be sure of that? Delta asked. That's why Blue trusts him, right? Echo asked. She knows he won't, and I believe her. We're never going back there. Alpha won't let us go back there. Delta looked down with uncertainty, but then let out a long sigh, smiling apologetically. Maybe you're right. He's a human, but... Yeah, he hasn't hurt us yet, I guess. Yeah, Echo nodded. Right. But I still won't go easy on him, Delta snapped, waving a finger at Echo. I gotta make sure he never does. I feel safer already, Echo giggled. You should, Delta nodded firmly. Blue's waiting for us, Echo whispered, nodding towards the camp. Think we should go back? Yeah, get her get back to it, huh? Charlie isn't still messing around with those kids, is she? Yes, she is. She's impossible, Delta groaned. Well, she's a kid, Echo laughed. She's also a raptor. We all are. I wonder if these humans still remember that, Delta sighed. Echo didn't answer that. Deep in her heart, she was trying not to think about the horrifying nightmares they'd endured in their childhood. And she also contemplated what Delta said. They were raptors, and when they'd picked up the scent of the pig, she had felt it. For the briefest of moments, she felt that instinct, that deep instinct inside her. They were apex predators. They were raptors. They could be enforcers easily, but could they really integrate with humans? Charlie and Blue seemed to think so, but Delta, she was still on the fence. I think Alpha remembers it, Echo finally whispered. Yeah, I think he does, Delta agreed. All right, and that was part 4. Now, technically, part 5. Technically, I normally end my reading here, but if y'all are enjoying and want to hear the next part, I'm willing to read it. Alright, I got a lot of people asking for more. Well, give me just a second. Reading this much hurts my face. Because I'm having to do all these different voices. So, give me a second. Massaging my cheekbones. Alright. Last one for the night. Part 6. Written September 25th, 2018. I am so very sorry for the trouble we've caused. Owen apologized to the camp counselor. The two were seated in his office in a large cabin near the entrance to the camp. The two had mugs of coffee in front of them and had been seated for only 5 minutes. But in that time, Owen had apologized no more than 10 times. The counselor, named Garth Hill, just waved it aside with a polite smile. The room was dark, but light was beginning to slowly ebb its way in as the sun was rising. The crisp feel of morning stirred the tired souls. Hey, don't worry about it. It's all right, If anything, the surprise is enough to make them kids happy, Garth chuckled. Be honest with you, most of these kids have never seen an extra species person before. And to have 4 just burst out and surprise us like that, phew, it's a rush to say the least. They were in full attack mode. They smelled the pig you were cooking and thought they'd caught their target, Owen answered. Well, either way, the girl named Charlie seemed to have a good time with the kids. She's kind of a child herself, to be honest, Owen answered. And the tallest one, what was her name? She seemed like the leader. That's Blue, and she's the beta. I'm the alpha. No offense, young man, but you're no Raptor. Why are you the alpha? Delta would ask me the same question if Blue and Echo weren't there to make sure she stays respectful, Owen chuckled. The details of how they came to be under my command is classified, and I can't talk about it. But what I can say is that the reason I'm their alpha now is because they need a firm but guiding human hand to teach them how to thrive. The place they came from before is... It's not a place any living creature should be rotting away in. Well, it sounds like them 4 have a history then, Garth acknowledged. I could tell that with that Delta girl and, Echo, was it? Those 2 have scars I don't know if I can ever heal. The 2 sipped their coffee a moment and Garth leaned forward. You know, this camp, it's not just a kid's summer camp, he explained. We're funded and founded by a church organization with a focus on saving lost souls and children with no homes. I know where you're going with this, Owen smiled apologetically, but I don't think sending these girls to camp will fix their issues. Maybe not, but what about letting them try to unwind a bit, he asked. This place, it's a refuge for so many who don't know where they're going. Why not let them stay for a while? Let them take in the mountain air and rest. Maybe the good Lord will provide clarity, maybe healing? Owen frowned and toyed with his mug, giving it a shrug. I don't know what good it'll do. Well, think about it for a while. I know you rented this site for the weekend next week, but if you want to give us a try, let the girls stay here a week or 2. We'll provide their needs. You're a good man, Mr. Hill. I'll consider that, but for now, they do have to come with me. I have a job for them. Well, Godspeed, friend. The girls climbed in the back of the van as Owen climbed in the driver's seat. They all had to adjust their tails and clawed feet to fit properly, but it was only a few minutes before the van was roaring down the road again. Alpha, we deeply apologize again for our error, Blue muttered. What matters is that no one was hurt and no one is in trouble, Owen replied, smiling. But I'm sure the brass will have some questions about this. I hope we get to come back. That was fun, Charlie squealed, waving out the window at the camp. Get your head inside, Charlie. You're embarrassing yourself, Delta groaned. I'm not embarrassed, and that's precisely the problem, Delta grumbled back. Would you both chill out? Owen asked. Jesus, we haven't been on the road 10 minutes and you're already bickering. Delta, what's eating you? She's still embarrassed we stumbled in on all those campers during our exercise, Charlie giggled. I am not embarrassed, and that's precisely the problem, Charlie answered, giving her best Delta impersonation. Both Blue and Echo stifled giggles as Delta blushed and pouted. I said cool it, Owen called back. The road took a few turns and sharp twists down the mountain, causing the girls to bump into each other and lean against the doors in surprise. Just how hard Owen was turning to keep up with them. God, I hate driving in twisting roads like this. Are we going home? Echo asked. Negative, Echo. Owen called back. Unfortunately not. What? Blue asked, surprised. Where are we going? Greensboro Airport, Owen replied. We have a private jet waiting to pick us up. A what? All the girls cried, now in complete, undivided attention. Owen grimaced and sharply turned the car, sending all 4 of them spinning into the back of the van. Ah, god damn it, don't crowd me like that. Sorry, Alpha, Charlie winced. Get your tail out of my face, Echo. Get your hand off my... Lock it up! Owen bellowed, losing his cool demeanor. Even Blue looked unnerved by the anger in his voice. Delta frowned but didn't say a word, and Charlie practically yelped like a wounded dog. For God's sake, the 4 of you bicker like warring countries, and to top it all off, I hate that I can't take you home after all this. Leaving you out there in the camp all night with barely any rest and sending you on a mission so quickly? A mission? Blue asked. Yeah. Got a call while coming to get you. We've got an escalating situation on an island off the Gulf of Mexico. It's a tropical island, so you'll be in your element at least. What's on this island that we have to deal with? Well, supposedly it's a branch-off point for illegal extra-species persons. They get dropped off on the island before hitching a boat ride into Florida or Louisiana. You're going in to cut it down. You're going in to shut it down, Owen explained. Now that sounds fun, Delta pined. Plenty of action and excitement. Sounds dangerous, too. If it's a large operation, they'll likely have some tough muscle, Echo added. Charlie was nodding, taking in the conversation. Blue, though, was still staring at the front seat where Owen sat in silence. Alpha, something else is bothering you, she whispered so the other girls couldn't hear. What is it? Should have known you'd notice, Owen whispered back. To be honest, yeah, I'm a bit unsettled. See, Hoskins was the one who assigned the mission.
Blue's eyes narrowed in disgust, and she resisted the urge to spit, which seemed rather painful. Why do you agree to it, sir? Not much choice. He's my contact with the Navy. Since they pay for you to live here, there are some things he says that I can't say no to, Owen replied. But what bothers me is what he's planning with this. That fat ass doesn't brush his own teeth without an agenda in mind. He's meticulous and cunning, so I know he didn't just give you this job for no reason. So you think it's a trap? No. Frankly, I don't know what to expect. I don't even know if I should be worried, Owen admitted to Blue. I don't think he'd jeopardize you by leading you into an unescapable trap. Doing that would ruin any hopes he has of recruiting you, but that doesn't mean there are worse things he could do. Maybe I'm just over-paranoid. Well, it's Hoskins. There's reason enough to be skeptical, right? Blue asked. Yeah, but, keep this in-house, Blue. I don't want the other girls panicking or letting this interfere with their jobs, he muttered. Blue nodded and sat back, watching Delta and Echo continue to discuss their tactics. Blue sat in silence, as Owen drove them further and further away from the joys of the camp and into the hands of whatever fate Hoskins had set up for them. Now, planes were a mixed bag for the girls. Each one responded differently to being on a jet or a helicopter. Echo was perfectly at home in the jet, easily being able to relax and get comfortable in the cushioned seat. Perhaps the private aspect of it made her feel more comfortable. Delta was stir-crazy. Without something to nag at or be upset over, she was without a source to vent, and thus often spent her time with arms crossed and pout expressed. Blue loved planes, though. Owen could remember all the times she'd wished she would born a harpy or a bird of some kind, so she could fly anytime she wanted. Looking out at the sky filled her with joy, and watching clouds pass by made her giddy like a child. Charlie, on the other hand... Ah! What was that shaking? It's just some turbulence. Settle down, Charlie, Owen said for the 9th time. It was louder that time. What if the engine blows out? We'll crash and die. I don't want to die. Get me off this thing, please. And where the heck are you going to go, you baby? We're in the air. We've been in the air for hours. Stop screaming, Delta mumbled. Delta, don't be mean to her, Echo sighed. I'm not being mean. I'm being practical, Delta retorted. There's nothing to be afraid of, Charlie, Blue agreed. Delta's right. We're in the air and we're fine. Nothing's going to happen. But you should see the sky. It's purple. We're so high in the sky, the atmosphere looks different. It's gorgeous, like a dream or something. I don't want to see, I don't want to see, I don't want to see, Charlie whimpered. Owen sighed and scooted over in the seat. Come here, sit by me, Owen offered. Charlie nodded and jumped into the seat, hugging Owen tightly in fear, burying her face in his shoulder. I hate heights. I hate airplanes. I hate helicopters. They suck. They all suck. Settle down, Owen whispered. You're all right. Planes. Why did it have to be planes? Delta teased. Hey, check you out with the movie references, Blue laughed. Hell yeah, Indiana Jones is the shit. Language, Owen snapped. Oh, come on, Alpha, you dropped swear words too, Delta pointed out. I don't make a habit out of it, Owen answered. Neither should you. Attention, the pilot's voice spoke through the intercom. We are now beginning our descent. Everyone fasten yourselves in. Owen took a moment to tighten Charlie's seatbelt and then his own as the plane began its slow crawl to the island. All right, listen up, girls, Owen announced. I don't know what's waiting down there for you. Your priorities are the same, though. Get in, take out the targets, and pull out. And only target extra species persons, right? Echo asked. Correct. If there are any humans in the facility, radio me immediately, and we'll reevaluate the situation. Do we know the location of the facility in question? Delta asked. No, but we have a rough guess. That it's on the northern side of the island. We imagine it's pier or docking area, Owen answered. We're going to land on the southern landing strip, a good 40 miles from your destination. Once we land, grab your gear, get suited up, and head to the rendezvous location. Yes, sir, the girls answered. After that, the plane ride fell quiet. Charlie whimpered quietly as the plane rumbled its way to the earth, and the rest of the girls felt a sense of dread wash over them. Though no one could place it, they all felt like something was very, very wrong with this job. The evening air was humid, and the girls loved it. This was the kind of night that they enjoyed more than any other. The humid air carried such fragrance on the wind, and the stars above were like 1,000 little eyes staring down, trying to pick them up out of the foliage. As they moved like shadows under the branches of the jungle trees, the four stayed in constant ecstasy. Charlie, having forgotten her previous fear, was now running neck and neck with Delta, who had put aside all earlier grievances and annoyance. They were the top predators of this jungle. They were the ones to be feared. Hold, we're close, Blue hissed. The girls all nodded and slowed their running to a slow walk and hunched over. There were lights ahead that broke through the tree line. The smell of the salty air and the sound of waves told the girls they were near a beach, and the sound of gulls and the stench of rotting wood told them they were docks. A pier was nearby. Let's try to go get a sight line. Pick our targets, then we radio into Alpha, Blue growled. Delta, Charlie, you both move to the west and flank the facility. Look for openings and evidence of illegal smuggling of extra-species individuals. Echo, you stay with me. We'll do the same to the east. Affirmative. The group split and took off in their respective directions. Blue had all but forgotten the earlier fear and doubt she had, and yet something was eating at her. Echo seemed to feel it. As they trotted to the eastern side of the jungle to analyze the building, she slowed down. Something doesn't add up, Echo whispered. What is it? Blue asked. If this is a location for illegal immigration of extra-species persons, where are they? Huh? We're not the only extra-species creatures with hypersenses. Surely a few of the immigrants down there should be able to pick us up by now, Echo pointed out. Blue paused and nodded, slowly feeling a sick feeling wash over her. Unless there are no extra-species persons down there. Blue, we got something here, Delta hissed over the comms. You need to get your tail over here and fast. On our way, Blue replied. Echo, on my 6. Roger. Blue and Echo darted across the jungle to Delta's location until at last they caught wind of her, ducking low beneath a bramble of bushes. Status, Blue hissed. You're not going to like it, Blue. Charlie's scouting a little ahead to verify. But those aren't extra species. They're humans. What? Echo whispered. Charlie, can you confirm? Blue asked in the comms. Yes, ma'am, Charlie called back. There's no sign that the extra species individuals were ever here to begin with. If I had to guess, it looks like there are a lot of guns here. Like, a lot of guns. Guns? Blue asked. Gun-running operation, Echo whispered. You mean we're walking in on gun smugglers? Delta growled. That is not what we were planning. Charlie, get back up here fast. We need to radio Alpha. Coming. Blue, get down! Delta cried, throwing herself on top of Blue and knocking her to the ground. Just where Blue had been, there was a screaming blast as debris and trees flew all over creation. The ground shook with force as a blast from an RPG sent all girls sprawling into the forest floor. Call in! Blue screamed. I'm good, Echo shouted. I'm fine too, Delta answered. Ow! I'm hit! Charlie cried. Echo climbed to her feet and ran to Charlie's position, while Blue tried to adjust her comms. Alpha, come in. Alpha, our position is compromised. The targets are humans. Repeat, the targets are humans requesting new orders, Blue called. There was no response, only silence. Alpha? Alpha, respond! The sky began to ring with machine gun fire, and Echo nearly dropped Charlie as she pulled her out of harm's way. Alpha! Owen, answer me! It's no good, Blue. They're either jamming our signal or he's abandoned us to save his own skin, Delta roared. Shut it, Delta. Alpha wouldn't do that to us, Blue screamed. Why else would he be so goddamn nervous about this if he didn't have something to hide, Delta cried. Can we argue later? Charlie whimpered, clutching her wounded shoulder. It hurts. Is it bad? Blue asked. Echo nodded. Probably broken, but nothing life-threatening, Echo whispered. What was Alpha hiding from us? Delta snapped, bringing up the subject again. Did he know this would happen? Blue just bit her lip. Hoskins. He said Hoskins gave us the job. Delta screamed a curse word and kicked the ground, pulling her tactical knife and trying hard not to plunge it into the nearest tree. That goddamn asshole! He trusted that fat bastard? He couldn't refuse him, Blue argued. Well, now he can't bail us out, Delta countered. Whether this is his fault or not doesn't matter. The Tangos know we're here and are gonna find us soon. What do we do, Blue? Alpha told us not to hurt any humans if we were found, Blue added. Charlie agreed. But we can't reach Alpha, Echo added. But Blue, you're the beta. You have to make this call, okay? What's it gonna be, Blue? Delta asked. Blue knelt down and bowed her head, listening to the sound of angry men shouting and scrambling over themselves to get to the girls. She could hear Charlie's whimpering sobs as blood dripped from her shoulder. Delta's heavy breathing and the smell of sweat on her brow as the reality of their situation made itself known. The sounds, the smells, the sensations of the jungle. It stirred in her, and there was no Alpha to calm her. No Owen to reach out with a reassuring hand and tell her it was okay. She knew this wasn't his fault. He didn't mean for this to happen. Of course not. He was her Alpha. She trusted him. But that trust didn't change the situation. I'm sorry, Owen, she whispered. Blue, your orders are simple, she hissed, a primal anger flashing in her eyes. Engage. Lethal force authorized. Kill everything that moves.
And that is part 6. Let me take a drink real fast. Ooh. Feels good. And I just killed that bottle. Well, I hate to leave it on that cliffhanger right there, because I'm sure you'll want to hear what happens in Chapter 7. But that might be where we need to call it. Besides, a lot of people are leaving now. We're down to 18 viewers, 17 viewers now, so a lot of people are pulling out now. So might be the right place to call it. So here's the deal, gang. And Daniel, if you're listening to this, you may need to know this too. But I've been given the week off of work. Because my grandfather died, I've been kind of in an emotional place. And my mind and heart aren't really on work right now. So I'm focusing more on getting my thoughts back in order. So my boss, one of my bosses, my manager, Alex, extended the offer to let me have the week off. And so I accepted the offer. So I am taking the week off for this week. And I'll be back to work next week. But because I'm off this week, I will be streaming and working on more videos. And it's probably a good thing anyway, because with the new hero and For Honor coming out this week, that gives me a bit more time and a bit more freedom to play the hero and make content about it. So what I'm saying is, if tomorrow I am free, now I may be, I don't know, but if tomorrow I am free, I may do another reading stream tomorrow, if you would like. It'll be earlier. I will have to do it earlier because at 8:30 I will be helping my brother out. But if y'all would like, I would be happy to do another reading stream with you guys then. Now I don't know if that'll happen because again, I may be busy or Havoc may want to join me for a few games of For Honor. I don't know. I haven't heard from Havoc in a while, so we'll have to see. But anyway, we'll have to see what happens. But this is a great opportunity for me to relax with you guys, get my mind off things, and make a little bit of money from YouTube. Because we're nearing the end of the month, and I got to keep making money through YouTube if I can. Because when I do YouTube, I try to make about $550 a month at least, because that covers rent, and my money from Longhorns can cover the rest. But right now I'm not at 550 yet. I'm only about 100 short, I think. But that's fine. Y'all don't need to worry about that. But doing more streams and making more videos will definitely help in that regard. So I'm going to be working on that. So anyway, yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed doing this with you guys tonight. I had a great time. I know that Hannah and I know that Aaron is probably no longer there, and I'm sure Daniel had to duck out because I know he's off work now, but like he's still probably closing up the restaurant if I know Daniel. Poor guy. I feel for him. Anyway, I'll text him later and thank him for dropping in while he did. But anyway, guys, thank you guys so much. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.